Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back. Welcome back to the Late Show. This is your host, Young Brando, live from Los Angeles. Once more, we're here to talk about watches. We're going to talk about the winners of the Grand Prix in Geneva. We are going to try to parse out who has won and why they have won. And we're going to celebrate them. And we're also going to look ahead a little bit in the fall auction season and perhaps go through some of the top lots in auctions that we have previewed but not reviewed. So let's go right to the winners and start with some of the more interesting ones. But I want to actually take a look first at the jury. So we have an idea about who makes the choices. As you know, Nick Fox, the famous historian, journalist, and luxury goods writer, was the chair of the jury. And he gathered around him a very impressive group of individuals, I have to say. Let me see if we can get that group picture. There are a few. There are a few. So let's try to see a couple of them. I think Waco had posted a few of them. Check it out. All right, let's pull it up. So here are some of the members. Nick Fox was the head of the jury. Waco from Revolution Watch Magazine, as well as The Rake. Aldous Hodge, a budding watch designer and a collector himself. Shari Rahman, who is also a famous collector. I think there were a few more people. Certainly, I had the impression that Daniela Dufour, who is a watchmaker and also happens to be the daughter of the famous Philippe Dufour, as well, was part of the jury. So essentially, what you have is a group of specialists who are historically informed, who, as collectors, follow contemporary trends. Some of them are designers like Aldous Hodge, others are watchmakers themselves. And the idea is basically to come up with really the top watches of the year. And the categories, I think, need some sort of revision, if you ask me. They seem to have fallen behind the times. And I don't really mean it only in the way that it has this ladies and men's kind of division, which to me seems very arbitrary and just based very loosely on the size of the watches. But also, they have a dive watch category, which has been at the forefront of sports watches for quite some time, but perhaps is no longer. They have a separate chronograph category as well. Not sure if those two need to be separate categories. Why not have like a sports watch or sporty watch category instead? Wouldn't that be a little more interesting? But yeah, I feel like some of the categories seem to be either a little confused or confusing, or perhaps outdated. Because when it comes to tourbillon, of course, that still remains uh, uh, a display of horological mastery. So I guess it still has its place. Calendar and astronomy, by all means, again, those are the kind of romantic and originary complications when it comes to horology. After all, um, it is by gazing at the stars and looking at cycles of moon that we started figuring out the passing of time and our place in it. So no objection there. Mechanical exception, of course, that's a great category. That's one of my favorites. One of the brands that I highlighted won. We'll get to that. But when it comes to, chronograph, divers, to me, those seem a little too specific of functions to highlight, and perhaps are in a way dividing attention in a way that's not really necessary. That's a little uncalled for, as it were. Sorry, I just realized I hadn't turned on the microphone, so let's go back to that. I do I do appreciate that they have uh, at least two categories for more accessible watches. Petite aiguille is the category for watches that sell between roughly $4,000 and change up to 11,000, and there's another category called challenge, and that's for watches that are less than 4,000. I think the official number is probably more like 3,500 Swiss francs. But I do appreciate those categories, and I hope they don't do anything to them, because those are very interesting segments. The mechanical clock, the mechanical clock category is very interesting as well. These are the mechanical exceptions: chronograph, divers, jewelry pieces, artistic crafts, or métier d'art, as they call it in French, petite aiguille, challenge, and mechanical clock. So let's go to the list of winners that they have announced earlier today. I think it was really quite amazing. They have additional prizes, of course. There was a special jury prize that went to François Junot, an innovation prize that went to Van Cleef and Arpels for their Lady Arpels Heure Floral Cerisier watch. The Audacity prize that went to Bulgari's Dan record-breaking Octofinissimo Ultra Thin, that was quickly dethroned by Richard Mille Peace. The Grand Prix committee was, I suppose, unfazed, and they chose instead the Octofinissimo Ultra, which was not only an inventive concept, which is a word that we should think about, because a lot of times these kinds of categories can become easily the realm of concept watches, what are essentially unwearable watches. You have to have a key to wind them and that kind of stuff. And Richard Mille's watch was that kind of gimmick, more or less. Whereas Bulgari's watch, again, whether you hate it or love it, was something that was at once inventive and wearable. The NFT that they placed on the dial may be considered a little gimmicky, but I actually admire the fact that they put in it an original work of art rather than just some sort of uh, fact sheet or rendering of the watch that you may have already bought, that you have invested basically $500,000 in. So the Audacity Prize was won by Bulgari for their Octofinissimo Ultra. The Horological Revelation Prize went to Sylvain Pinot for their Origine watch. Sylvain Pinot, as much as I know, is a new brand, is a relatively new brand that has introduced this watch earlier this year, and that's the unmistakable detail, I guess, is the bridge that more or less occupies the lower half of the dial of the watch. The balance, I should say, that is held by a bridge that runs across. It's a watch that both shows some horological skill and also some merit in finishing. So I think it's a really interesting watch. Not necessarily my cup of tea. Not that that should matter, but certainly something that caught the eye of the jury in this particular competition, which is the grand prize. Bruce, unfortunately, Lyric Etude number one wasn't even nominated. The process is a little bit confusing. Earlier in the year, they announced a list of entries, which simply means that you submit your watch for the competition, right? And then they winnow that down to a list of official nominees. And Lyric, for better or worse, did not actually make the cut to be one of the finalists, which they call nominees. So, unfortunately, they didn't win. The watch that won that category is, I think, very interesting. We can go to that immediately. That is the category called Petite Aiguille, which is just a fancy way of saying the best watch under 10K. And that went to Trilobe. Nuit Fantastique Dune edition. Dune, I'm guessing, referring to the particular frosted finish of the dial in this golden sand color. It's a jump hour watch. An interesting concept. Again, not necessarily my cup of tea, but I like the kind of finishing work that was done both on the dial and on the movement of the watch, which is very minimal and something that helps aspects of the watch pop out, whether it is the balance when it comes to the movement and the micro rotor, or or the jump hour medallion, let's say, that is both distinguished by the use of negative space on the dial, as well as the Clou de Paris, the hobnail decoration in the middle. Actually, wait a second. My mistake. This is not a jump hour watch because you actually have a rotating ring on the outside. So that's where it shows the hours right here, right, with the ring rotating and the logo, the upper point of the logo showing the hour. And then you have minutes here and the seconds here in a constant turning ring as well. The design of this creation favors minimalism and plays with perceptions. It played with my perception a little too much, as you have seen. The elegant grained dial defies symmetrical shapes, is made up of 4 parts, 3 of which are in permanent rotation. I guess the jury was impressed by that concept of continual rotation, which is in an interesting and poetic way of expressing time, I guess. Raw and uncluttered, this unstructured dial opens 3 distinct windows. The largest ring for hours, that chapter ring on the dial. The minutes wheel that appears within an aperture. This was the minutes. And then under that, you have the seconds wheel, which alternates between a Clou de Paris center and an azured ring. Yeah, to me, this is too confusing of a watch. I like digital displays on watches, but I would rather have them with a jumping hour mechanism if that is the intended visual aesthetic, honestly. But obviously, making a jumping hour or jumping minutes mechanism is much more difficult. Simply the energy expenditure is immense. I mean, it was a big feat for Lange to just release their new Zeitwerk, which has a 72-hour power reserve, double the last generation, without significantly enlarging the dimensions of the case, and really finding a way of fitting into that case 2 spring barrels instead of 1. So that jumping hour and jumping minutes in the case of the Zeitwerk really requires a lot of force, and that's not something that any old watchmaker, any old manufacturer can necessarily achieve. So I shouldn't be surprised. I guess a nascent brand didn't really take that challenge, found another way of expressing time digitally. Not very impressive to me, but I guess the rotational continuous expression appealed to the jury. So this was the one that won the category where Lyrique was entered, but did not actually make to the final list of the nominees. Oh, hey.
Hello, how you doing?
Good, man. Nice to see you.
Nice to talk to you again. Sorry I had to jump out yesterday
Oh, no
early
way.
with trouble, as
Well,
usual.
I hope it wasn't that much of a trouble. So,
Yeah,
I mean, I hope it was just a nightly, putting the
yeah,
kids
it's just
kind
a
of thing.
nightly chaos. Just the usual nightly chaos.
Yeah, I was just talking about the Grand Prix winners, the GPHG winners in Geneva that were announced earlier today
Right.
in the gala.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'm aware of a watch that's been doing the YouTube rounds. Is it the Codigo or something or other? The Earth turning one. It was by a brand that's like $700-800, something like that. So
Which
slowly
one?
getting. Um, Not a watch snob has a review on it.
This?
Sega Design. That's it. Sega Design. They won that event with a watch that was, I think, about $700, but I guess relatively innovative in its use of a sphere instead of a dial. I guess it's a cute watch. Yeah, it's
You
fine.
mean
They
the
definitely
you mean the Hermes watch?
no Sega Design, CIGA.
I don't think we are talking about the same competition.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's no winner by that name or with that concept.
Not this year. I think last year.
Possibly.
Or are you looking at all of them?
Possibly. So we talked about the Petite Aiguille just now, which is for watches right under $10,000.
Mhm.
The challenge prize was given to this Mad Edition Mad One Red, which was a way of making the design of Max Büsser accessible to a different kind of crowd, to a larger group of watch enthusiasts. I know there was a lottery at some point to be allocated one, so it was all the rage. Some
Mhm.
people won, and I don't know. I see it on a lot of watch journalists' wrists, so I don't know if they actually won it all by lottery or not. But for
The
again for
judges were
the
all wearing this one. It's kind of fun, interesting.
it is
They're
a
very
fun watch.
passionate about this one.
It's a fun watch, honestly. I
Yeah,
can
yeah.
I can admit that, just as the Trilob, which won that 10K and under category, but it's not necessarily what I look for in a
Mhm.
timepiece. It looks like heaps of fun, but not for a wristwatch, I guess.
Mhm.
um, but yeah, it looks very futuristic in a way that a lot of the horological machines of Max Büsser and friends look like. And I guess there's something to be appreciated in their effort of making their designs accessible to a wider public, because
Mhm.
the watch that won the grand prize, which is an MBNF horological machine, I think, or legacy machine. Let me see.
Mhm.
No, it is a legacy machine. That probably is what, 172,000 Swiss francs.
Did
So
I see correctly that a Tudor won an award here?
yes, they won the divers watch category with their FXD
That's a
2020.
hardcore category.
Yeah, it is. It is.
That's not a soft one to win.
Saint Peter, $5. Thank you so much for the super chat. Saint Peter, he says, I was right about the MBNF sequential Evo. It has been on my list for 7 Grail watches since its release. Yeah, Grail watch is an interesting category, of course, Saint Peter. Having 7 Grails seems a little excessive. I think there's supposed to be one, but but
I think for me, as reviewing that, to me, I classify that as being like your S tier watches. Like there is no higher tier except for maybe quote unquote the Grail.
yeah, yeah, that's an interesting category. Look, I mean, this is a watch that I can actually see more, uh, you know, that I can kind of, in an alternate universe, I can see myself wearing it. And
Hmm.
there's a kind of distinction, I guess, between what MBNF makes as legacy machines, which are more expressive but still within lines of conventional wristwatch design, and horological machines, which are really out there.
Mm.
The legacy machines usually have aspects that for me are quite intriguing. This one, let me read a little bit so we get on the same page. Conceived for MBNF by Stephen McDonald, the LM sequential Evo explodes the current limits of existing chronographs with a back to the drawing board approach towards our assumptions on chronograph construction. So it's a chronograph, which is also a separate category, by the way, in GPHG. Chronograph and diver gets its own category, which I feel like could be maybe made into a sports watch category, but that's just me. The LM Sequential Evo features two complete chronograph displays, each with a large 60-second counter and a smaller 30-minute counter. As you can see, these are the 2 seconds counters for the 2 separate chronographs, and then up there, flanking where would be 12 o'clock on a normal wristwatch, you have the 2 30-minute counters. And you can see the pushers for each chronograph on each flank of the case. As you would expect, each of these displays can be started, stopped, and reset completely independently of each other. That sounds fantastic to me and very intriguing, using the start, stop, and reset pushers on their respective sides of the case. But this goes much further. This goes to 11, as they say in the Spinal Tap, thanks to the revolutionary twin-verter binary switch that allows multiple timing modes. Split seconds, sequential, which is to say lap timer, and even a cumulative chess match mode. Wow. The old timers in New York parks are, New York public parks are rejoicing. Chess match mode, a combination never seen before in any previous wristwatch. So, I mean, there are 2 fully integrated chronograph movements in it that can also work in some sort of cohesion, I guess. Maybe St. Peter should jump on to explain it to us, to display split seconds, lap timer, and even a cumulative chess match mode. The fully integrated dual chronograph caliber incorporates 2 column wheel chronographs and patented internally jeweled vertical chronograph clutches, ensuring there is no drop in amplitude or power reserve when the chronographs are functioning or not. That's amazing. That's amazing, because if you are coming from the vintage side of things, you know that everything can drain that power reserve when you start engaging functions on a watch. So that's good to hear. So column wheel, of course, is the feel that a lot of modern chronograph heads love in terms of the action of the pushers, and everything else in column wheel and in connection with vertical chronograph assures that you have no stuttering when you engage the chronograph, and also no additional drain and no additional friction on the movement when the chronograph is engaged. The caliber features the signature legacy machine flying balance wheel. This is their signature, the flying balance wheel. And superlative hand finishing, internal bevel angles highlighting handcraft, polished bevels, Geneva waves, handmade engravings, and darkened bridges. The Evo case is in zirconium, lighter than stainless steel and more durable than titanium. Features 80 meters of water resistance thanks to a screw down crown, 30 meters more than your standard Royal Oak, and integrated rubber strap, galvanic black dials with superluminova, and the flex ring shock protection system. That's pretty nice. So it's not just a
Yeah.
tricked out dial, actually quite functional.
Two chronos, a whole bunch of mixed modes in between that probably never before seen.
Yeah, and you know I mean it's
Like
not
chess timer mode. Has that been on the watch before?
and it's not 50 millimeters either, like 44 millimeters. That's you can imagine wearing that. That's
Hmm.
not too bad. Nice. St. Peter says one for each day of the week. Hey, that's St. Peter.
Hey, hello.
Hey man,
Today.
how are you doing?
How are you guys doing? Ozzy, very, very nice to meet you, man.
Nice to meet you.
So, YB, I wish I wish I could explain all the technical mastery and wizardry with this piece, but really, there's an excellent video of Max and Stephen McDonald that
Mhm.
came out right after they released the watch, and
Nice.
so this guy, I mean, I've always been fascinated by the MB&F designs because of how just out there they are, let alone like just the masterful craftsmanship and all that kind of stuff. But especially with the perpetual Evo and now the sequential Evo, these are both the products of this genius watchmaker who, as I understand it, is more or less self-taught. And I believe
Mm.
his background is in, if I'm not mistaken, he's like a computer programmer or something. So he's just this, as they would say, I believe they used to call them Renaissance men, right? Like this guy who he can just do everything basically. He comes from this tech background and all of a sudden was like, oh, I think I'll like figure out how to design and build watches and did
I
it.
I
Yeah.
do want to say I've got that coding background, and there's a really incredible video. I encourage anyone into horology take a look, and you'll see why it's relevant. And it's from the U.S. Navy talking about the fire control systems that were in use for creating firing solutions for guns on ships in World War II. And it's basically an instruction manual on all of the different mechanical components and how they relate to different mathematical functions. And that's what a watch and all of its complications actually are just mathematical functions. And so there is a reasonably good mapping between things that you could do in software and how you could do it with using physical cogs and wheels and hardware. And it's well described basically. So it's not as much of a leap as you may think. Still awesome, but I'm just saying that someone who is in a programmer with a little bit of specialized training would become a watchmaker pretty easily, apart from like the physical skills.
That's not surprising to hear. I took one coding class when I was in undergrad. I was, YB's familiar, but I studied fine arts. I was in studio arts, and I'm a designer now, so I use 3D CAD software. Actually, some of the same stuff that I think MB&F might even use SolidWorks, which is the
Right.
software that I use, and it's it's a product design software, but it can be used for mechanical simulation and all different types of stuff. It's a
Mm.
really really amazing digital tool. But in the coding that I did, the one thing that I realized, and this is kind of my it was kind of my weakness, right? Is like your syntax has to be right on. Like if you get
Mhm.
like 1 point off, next thing you know, your code doesn't work. And I
Mhm.
think, and again, I never really got that much deeper into coding. But what I realized was, I think the people that can excel with it, they have excellent pattern recognition skills, which I think are the same type of things that when you're working with machines and mechanisms, you need to be able to see the similarities and the regularities that would allow these components to mesh together properly or not mesh together properly.
Mhm.
And so it's not surprising to hear that. And to me, it's I just get very enamored by the idea of someone taking on a new challenge. Not It's
Mm.
not like late in life, but he was already into his career, and all of a sudden he decided, like,
Yes.
hey, I want
Yes.
I want to do something else. Like, I mean, there's something very romantic to me about that, of just saying, I can do whatever I want to do. I'm like, I'm leaving I'm leaving this job, and I'm gonna go. And then next thing you know, this guy is designing this movement that wins, best picture in the Oscars of watchmaking. And
Absolutely.
and so I think it's really great, and I'm just really fascinated by him, to hear him talk about it too. Like, so this conversation between uh between Stephen and Max, I think, is just really great, because they talk about all these different technical hurdles that they had to overcome just to build this thing. So, like, if you see
Mm.
the back of the movement, it's got these two giant wheels on it that I think are made out of titanium, or like some kind of crazy metal. And the reject rate for making those is, yeah, you could see them right there. So they're super, super thin. I
Mm.
mean, like, parts like that
Yeah.
don't exist on most watches. So without those two wheels, and I apologize for not remembering what the technical terminology for those wheels is, but
Sure.
without those actually functioning the way that they function, this whole movement just does not work. So
Yeah.
they basically had to go through, like, this whole process of, and this thing was in development for years, which is not uncommon for watch movements. You hear about movements taking years, but this guy, when he approached the perpetual calendar project, he's, and Max, I've heard, I'm a big fan of Max, so I always watch his videos every time a new one comes out.
So you are Max Buse says friend, or Max Buse and friends, or Max Buse and friends?
Believe it or not, I walked right by the guy at Watch Time. So I went to Watch Time on Friday, and
Yeah.
he's there. And it was like, for me, that experience was kind of an overload. Like, I just started going to watch events this year, basically. So I'm like, I saw all these, like, big, like, multi-million or potentially billionaire watch collectors who I know from Instagram walking around. I mean, the event was crazy.
Mhm.
There's like,
By the way, guys, just to say one thing, Max Buse, of course, is himself, right? Maybe not of McDonald's level. He basically left what was a very cushy job at Harry Winston as leading their Opus series, where he would introduce these sorts of legacy machines on a yearly basis, which had become some of the most interesting uh, revelations every time there was a watch show on an annual basis. So he left that job to pursue his own dream and started MBNF from very scratch. And
Mm.
there were times apparently that he was about to go down himself
Mhm.
and completely go bankrupt. Because he wasn't able to, he lost suppliers, he wasn't able to deliver certain watches on time, and things somehow work by stars aligning, and now MBNF is one of the most desired and respected independent brands, and it has now won, like St. Peter said, the Academy Award, right,
Mhm.
in Geneva.
Max tells that story a lot, and you can really tell, he talks about how, it gave him gray hairs and it made him age and all this kind of stuff. And I think, I can't remember. So what was he at? Do you recall? Was he at? And he calls it Jaeger. Was he at Jaeger before or after Harry Winston? Like, I know he
I
was.
think probably before.
Yeah.
Probably
So he was
before.
there before. So he was managing them. I think I vaguely remember him saying when he was there, they were making like 40,000 reversos a year or something like that. Like, just like these crazy numbers. And I think, because I think MBNF, they're under 300. I think they're like about 250 pieces,
Wow.
or something like that a year. Yeah, which is just incredibly limited. Um, but sorry, just to circle back a little bit, and unfortunately I can't hang for too long, because I gotta try to be responsible. But so with the perpetual movement, the way that Stephen approached it, and Max always tells the story, is he kind of wanted to do it. Max was like, no, those are terrible. They always break. Clients are always breaking the movements, and then it's a nightmare to service them. And so the way that he approached doing his perpetual calendar was like, well, yeah, that's because this whole history of watchmaking, the perpetual calendar, the approach has been wrong. Like basically everyone's been doing it wrong. And he's like, I have an idea of how I want to do it. So his system essentially starts with counting, because every month has a minimum of 28 days. The module starts by counting the 28, and then for the odd months it adds the extra days. And so he approached it with this completely different idea of like, well, let's just totally rebuild the whole mechanism and think about it a different way. And apparently that they've figured out a way to make it more or less user proof, right? Like, or idiot proof, let's say, so that, the owner, if they're just pushing the buttons kind of chaotically and out of sequence for programming it, they can't break it. And now whether or not that's true, I don't know. Who knows? But they claim it. You know what I mean? They claim
you'll figure out how good the warranty is after you've pushed the limits.
Yeah.
Honestly, probably you don't want to know.
No, I don't want to
after you spend, basically $250,000 on a watch, you probably don't want to figure that out right away.
Do you have children, St. Peter?
No, I mean the person who I'm with right now's son just turned 10. So I'm starting to kind of like get a little bit of the, where I'm not exactly the stepdad, but I'm on the periphery kind of that.
Right. Okay. I don't know if you've ever seen a baby operate a computer, but the capacity for finding new bugs is kind of ridiculous, because you think your behavior can be random when you're trying to push the limits or something, but you get a baby on top of it. It's like, oh, we thought this was foolproof. I guess not.
Yeah, I have the I have the privilege, and joy of having a 1.5-year-old nephew and a 7-year-old niece, and I've been able to watch. Luckily, I'm close enough to my brother that I've been able to watch them grow. And like my niece now is like, she's this like gymnast. She's like going to gymnastics like 3 times a week, and she loves to perform and everything. And it is amazing. But I know what you're saying. Like, I know I have seen that experience of what is the kid doing? Like, what are they trying to figure out? And I actually think I think grown-ups are actually just big children in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? As much as we like to think we're not, like, we're all just kids,
Yeah, for us, the idea of foolproof would be like pushing the pushers out of order or something like that, and then trying to wind it or something. Like, for them, it's like, how about if I wind it slowly while holding this one down and push this, and then I start going faster, and that it's like, we said foolproof to a certain extent, like.
Right.
Hey, I'm sure Stephen McDonald was that kid at some point. So let them tinker, let them figure things out. Hopefully not destroying a very precious timepiece in the process. But
well, those Tinker toys were really the best ones. I always talk about how I was like a Lego kid. And I think that ultimately led me into, now I've worked in the field of architecture for 13 years. And, just being able to build things. I mean, it's kind of beautiful when adults, they give kids these toys that are really actually tools for understanding how building works. And I think with this horology renaissance that we're in right now, it's really interesting. I'm very curious to see what happens specifically stateside with education, with watchmaking education in the future, because aside from the recent slowdown just in the global economy and the effects on the secondary watch prices and that kind of stuff, there still seems to be more and more interest in this field year after year, over the past 10 years. So
I think as certain things become redundant, people are starting to learn how to enjoy them more. So whether it's a manual transmission on a car, or a mechanical watch, or vinyl is also having a thing. I don't think this is just Ludditism. It's just and wet shaving. This is a channel for wet
Sure.
shavers as
Yeah.
well. So these are not about just outcomes. It's sort of recognition that sometimes the process, as inefficient as it might be, is the enjoyment and not the outcome.
So I have a collection of, I think I'm up to almost 300 vinyl records now, and I
Oh,
actually
wow.
started buying them before I had I
Before it was
didn't even have a
popular.
turntable,
Oh, okay.
and so my experience with the record and why it's so much different than a CD or now just Spotify, for example, is like it's this beautiful work of art in itself. It's this large, like 12-inch.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's a gatefold. You can open it up. There's paperwork in there. Sometimes there's posters and all this stuff, and you have to actually engage with the mechanism in order for it to work. So you have to put the record on. You got to drop the needle carefully. You got to flip it over. Like in the case of my turntables, like I could adjust the pitch so I could speed it up or slow it down. And that whole experience to me is just so much more engaging. And I'm not so much of an audiophile. Like I want it to sound good, but like I'm not one of these people that like it must sound perfect and I freak out on that stuff. But I do think
Right.
that watches in general, like for me, a massive component of my fascination with this hobby is like it's an object that you interact with,
Mm.
like
But actually, there's something that ties together what both of you were saying, in the sense that there is a renaissance now of LPs, as you know, St. Peter, right? The more they have become obsolete in a way technologically, the more people now yearn for them, because they perhaps desire that sort of
Yeah.
manual interaction with the medium, just like we have all this fascination with tool watches that are no longer tools.
Yeah. I mean, vinyl at Walmart, just we're not talking about collectors havens here. At Walmart, the section for vinyl is bigger than the section for 4K, movies.
that blows my
And I
mind.
don't just mean physically bigger.
No, it blows my mind. I mean, I've been boycotting Walmart so long that I had no idea they even sold vinyl records. But recently, I saw that Walmart is selling pre-owned Rolex.
That's right.
Oh, on their website. Yeah. But I mean, in the physical store, they actually have a section for vinyl at Walmart, which will blow you away. It blew me away.
I'll have to pop in next time.
Yeah.
The one good thing about New York City is there's no Walmart. It's one of the best.
Right.
It's one of the best things about New York. No Walmart.
I've been collecting a lot of physical media, but not for the same reasons. But there is a fantastic chain here, 2 stores here in Vegas called Zia Records, and maybe in New York you got something similar, but it's just all physical media. It's a gigantic store, like much bigger than I ever saw in Australia for physical media, even when it was popular back in the 90s. It's just a heaven, and it's filled with physical media, and it's all almost completely pre-owned, so the prices are incredibly good. So I really love stopping by there about once a month to try bargain hunt, find some classics that I've been unable to add to my collection for quite some time.
I need to know where the watch equivalent of that place is. That's what I'm waiting. That's what I'm waiting for. I want people to lose interest in the hobby enough that the deals are just spilling out of sale tables everywhere.
Look, MBNF, that's not happening to MBNF anytime soon, especially after last night's victory in Geneva. But I think it is happening to a lot of brands at this point in time, because there was a point in the market where there was almost nothing undesirable all of a sudden, because the ultra desirable, the extremely hyped up watches had become so inaccessible and so unavailable that people were starting to snap up anything and everything else. Those days are thankfully over, and I don't think they are coming back anytime soon. And a lot of brands are, in terms of the secondary market pricing, going back to where they exactly were just 5-7 years ago. So I think deals will be much better to come by, much easier to come by very soon.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I guess that's the silver lining, and just the general negative aspects of the economy kind of
Yeah.
tanking, right? Is like, oh well, watches are cheaper, and it's like, if you're one of the privileged people where your income's not affected by it, and you're not really getting nailed by inflation or all the other various economic problems, then it is great. It does. I mean, and
What?
the trend seems to continue going down. I know there's a lot of
Yeah,
people
for sure.
online who are saying, "Oh, it's not going down," but it's been going
It's going
down for
down.
about
Last
8
couple of
months, right?
weeks. Yeah, I mean, the behind the scenes where wholesale price have been going down pretty consistently, but in the last few weeks, I'm seeing a lot more retail options. I mean, retail grey, really capitulating a lot more. What are you after, by the way? I mean, yeah, what are you after? I
Oh
mean,
yeah, sorry.
you're seeing opportunities, so I mean, where do you think those opportunities are for you?
Unfortunately, I'm not really in a situation to pick up anything considerable right now. I did just acquire like a new kind of like entry level Cartier, like a steel tank American
Oh,
recently,
cool.
and I love it, man. It's the
Yeah.
medium size, and it just barely fits. I'm like in the last pre-factory perforated leather hole, but it honestly, on my wrist size, it's like 6 3/4, I think, and
Mm.
it just works. It's great, and
The
I can.
Americans are super classy design. Unmatched in terms of design, right? There's no real parallels to that. There's a lot of places that have square watches, but if you want to say just the regular, it's like tank must style. But the American, yeah, not much substitute for that. Very classy.
Yeah, I tried on several of like the lower kind of more accessible price point steel Cartier pieces, and
Mhm.
I was considering the Dumont at the same time, and I actually was
The
interested in.
Santos Dumont,
Yeah,
or
yeah, the Santos
uh
Dumont, the particularly the extra large one that has like the ultra thin manual wind. I think it's a
Mm.
Piaget
mm.
movement.
Yeah.
And I was kind of concerned about the size because I tried on the medium Dumont that was like a two-tone, and it looked awesome. The size looked awesome, and I was like, oh my god, like but it was quartz. Like anything below the
Oh, because
extra large.
if it's not the XL, sometimes it's the quartz. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the quartz.
Cartier have such good watchmaking when they want it to be, and then it just sort of, they make very sexist choices about size and which watches get a quartz. But you know what? In some cases, it makes sense. I bought my mum the Tank Must large, and I
Nice.
wouldn't have got it for her if it was mechanical. I mean, she's a 7-year-old lady. It's not, she's not going to learn mechanical watches overnight, and it's not going to go well if it's not working on her most of the time. So I get it, but it did surprise me that some of their more adventurous pieces. I don't know what it's called, but it's the one where there's like a panther that sort of clips onto the bottom of the watch. So that's how the clasp is. It's a panther head that just snatches on with its teeth,
Mm.
and
Uh,
that's
I
super
sh-
cool watch, like
I should
20,000
know.
or something.
Yeah, I should know what the
But
price is, but they have so many just wild out there case shapes. Like my journey in watch in just like I've been like Lange for me has been my favorite brand for a very long time before I even
mm,
really started to educate myself on watches. Like something about their design aesthetic and how
I just
high
spoke
end.
to you initially.
Well, yeah, it's like
That's really interesting.
it's the overall look. It's the overall look, and like so, when I got into this, it was kind of like everyone knows about Rolex. And then it was like, oh, the Submariner, like that actually really looks good. And I had seen these
Mm.
articles, like not even like watch blogs. It was like fashion magazines, like GQ, like that kind of
Yes.
stuff.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
oh, it's the perfect watch. You could dress it up, you could dress it down. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, that's intriguing. And there's the whole history in there. And then I started looking at all the other brands, like the big brands like AP, Patek, and all that kind of stuff. And YB and me the other day, we had this back and forth on Instagram because he posted the picture of the Nautilus. And when I first saw that, I was like, oh, that's a copy of the Royal Oak. They just copied the Royal Oak. Like, I had no idea it was the same designer, right?
Yeah.
And so it's funny when you're
Well,
just getting into this,
you know,
you have no idea.
you're an educated guy. You would know this. There is a concept as self-plagiarism, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, I think those
You
gut
can't
checks
say
are
that he
important.
copied
I think those
himself.
are very honest. Those are very, very important, and knowing what you liked before you started learning about the watches, I think is really important, because I was discussing with someone else that actually the price doesn't matter, the heritage doesn't matter once you start wearing the watch. Like, it really just has to be talking to you with its design and what it's made of at a very visceral level, that all of the heritage and so forth, in my opinion, doesn't really add to the experience of wearing the watch as much as the object itself. That's my opinion.
It's funny because when I first started looking more closely at the Nautilus, because I had seen so many images of the Royal Oak, because it's just all over the place. I
Yeah.
was like, oh man, that thing just looks like a Royal Oak copy. Like, it's got like rounded octagonal bezel kind of, and I didn't really understand like how significant Patek Philippe was at that point in time when I first saw this watch. So there wasn't that whole like, oh, but it's Patek. It didn't.
Exactly.
But then I kind of switched, and then I was like, man, this is so much more refined and elegant than the Royal Oak. But then I went back when I started seeing the Royal Oak bracelet, because it's flat, because it has all the flats on it. When it rotates, like, it just has this
Yeah,
crazy
when it plays
disco
with light.
ball. Oh yeah, there you go. Like, it's this. Is that a Casio or is that a?
Yeah, it is a Casio.
I saw that when I was about to ask you. I was like, "Are you wearing an AP
Fucking
watch?"
bro.
The case is quite thick. It's a little thick for an AP.
Hey man, AP make a lot of watches.
But that bracelet, even on the Casio, is beautiful. Like, there's something
It is.
about
It
it
is.
that is
It's
so
sort of the really sort of the main bad thing. The main reason I wanted the mod was because I just wanted something on steel so I could wear it, getting wet, washing the car or something like that, as opposed to resin, which is okay, but I'd much rather have steel for such activities. It actually looks too good. Like, it looks good enough that it feels like you're wearing a fake, as opposed to this is just a fun thing,
right.
Yeah, like, if this looked, because my neighbor has a Royal Oak, and because of maybe the era it was made, or the polishing jobs it's gone through since, it honestly wasn't nicer. It actually wasn't nicer. It's the bracelet. It wasn't actually nicer.
I do think the watch loses a lot of its draw and appeal as it starts to get rounded over. As those sharp edges start to get rounded over, it looks like a completely different object. And there is something about the vintage, the well-worn Royal Oak that has eased edges and there's scratches all over it. It becomes its own thing, but it definitely doesn't pop the same way that like a crisp, sharp one does. And especially like those mirror polished bevels.
Yes.
Once those start to lose, because once everything gets micro scratched, it's almost like a brushed finish, right? So
Yeah.
once the whole thing has a more kind of monotone, brushed look to it, and it loses that contrast between the brushed and the mirror polished surfaces, the object is just different,
Yeah.
Did while we're talking about this, did either one of you two submit a design?
I did not. No, because I already have a perfect design in the lineup that I don't want to highlight any further.
Nice, nice.
So the prices fall down, and I have a chance to get one.
Yeah, and you're gonna get it. When they announced that competition, I was like, this is perfect. Like, I'm gonna do this, and I had an idea, and I've just been super slammed at work and with personal stuff. I just didn't prioritize it, and unfortunately, I missed the window. But I have.
Too bad.
I'll quickly describe the two ideas that I have because I think you might be intrigued.
Yeah, please.
So one of them was a full titanium case, or sorry, not titanium, full platinum bezel, platinum everything, finished the same way a normal Royal Oak would be finished. So nothing about the case or bezel would be different. And it's in like, I think I wanted to do like 37 or 38 because I think the 41s they wear pretty big because of the integrated case. So it was like, I'm thinking 30, 37, 38, a little bit on the smaller side. So Tourbillon, with the Evolute tapisserie, that is the concentric rings that I don't think they're in the AP catalog anymore. Like they were for a while. Like all the Tourbillon Royal Oaks, there was a period of time a few years ago where they had the tapisserie pattern, instead of just being a straight waffle grid, had radiating lines out from the center of the tourbillon, and then they had
radiating out.
Yes. So
Okay.
So it had it was a grid that was made of concentric rings and radiating lines, but it was cut on the same machine and it had the same depth and the same texture, but the geometric pattern that was created by it was I believe it's called the Evolute tapisserie. So it was like this whole new tapisserie pattern they created for tourbillon references, and they've all been phased out as I understand it. I don't think AP is doing that anymore, but to me that was like really special because it was not super traditional. Yeah, that's it right there. So it's
Oh, I see what you mean. So the waffle pattern is radiating, but this is still probably constructed the same way as the other dials, where it's a concentric
pantograph. Still pantograph cut, I think. Still
pantograph.
And that's a really cool machine. So they make a plate that's like the exact same scale, but just way bigger.
Yeah.
Or it's like it's really cool to watch how the machine works. It's like a very interesting thing. So yeah, so it's like this watch, so full platinum, finished the same way, with a solid pink, red gold or pink gold or whatever that is, tapisserie dial, fume, so it gets dark on the outsides. And then I had this idea of like baguette hour markers, and like I think what I wanted to do was like fancy pink diamonds. So like they're diamonds, but they're like
so you something that's a little bit more under the radar,
right. So and then what I realized
I'm
is
joking.
no. But
you got the gold dial and the tourbillon.
But if they made that, it would look like something that would fit in the catalog. Like it wouldn't stand out in
Right.
the catalog.
Yeah, in the catalog maybe, but I'm just saying it's a pretty special piece.
Oh no, of course. But like, hey, if I think the guy whoever wins the competition, I think they get a watch, right? Like they get
right.
So I was like, I bet.
Apparently, there are going to be 3 winners, which are going to be who are going to be announced in about 5 days, and then I think they hold the right to produce those watches either as unique pieces or serially. I don't know who the winner actually gets. Maybe they do get a watch. I don't. You tell me. I haven't read the conditions that carefully, to be honest.
Yeah, I didn't really get that deep into it, like as I said before, just because of my personal stuff. But it sounded like, oh man, if your design gets chosen, like you get a Royal Oak, and I was like, oh my god, like this is amazing, like, especially for someone like me who can't afford a new Royal Oak. It's like this is the perfect, especially if you are a designer. Like this is your chance. Like get a Royal Oak, So I'm kind of bummed out I didn't just make myself do it. But then as I started seeing Austin post the pictures of people submitting these designs, I was like, wow, Like some of these are really far out there. And then I thought like, okay, this original design I came up with, that doesn't cut it. It's not interesting enough. So then I thought, and I'll just like, part of me kind of like doesn't want to tell people about this because I feel like it's so cool that I should keep it a secret. But at the same time, I don't know if they would ever do it, but it's the tapisserie pattern. So basically the same thing that I just described, but focusing more on this pattern where the entire outside surface of the bezel, case, and bracelet have the tapisserie pattern machined into it. So imagine if this just pattern from the dial just continued out onto like the whole outside surface of the watch. So it like that piece becomes more of like, you know, it's this textured, it has this textured surface, but it really celebrates this idea that's like how you take part of the design and just maximize it. Like how you say like, all right, we're going to take this aspect of this design and we're just going to cover it all over the place. Like almost like the way that Rolex has kind of introduced those like fluted pattern dials, or, you know, there was that period of time they did
Jubilee.
like, the Jubilee dials that said like Rolex, like all over the place. Like they're kind of gaudy, but they're kind of fun at the same time. And I think if they figured out a way to actually apply the tapisserie pattern to the entire outside surface of the watch, just like conceptually as a piece, that would be a pretty.
That's a pretty tricky one. Along the Rolex lines, it could happen because those dials some of the dials are about laser etching. So it's conceivable and I think scalable that you could do that to larger pieces without too much issue. But because of the way they do the tapisserie dials, you would have to find an analogy and not literally the same machining technique, I think. But very interesting. It would be fun to touch.
I mean, I know you could probably do it with like a micro milling machine. Of course, it's not the same. You know, you'd want it to be cut on the exact same.
Exactly.
So I don't know what the limitations of that machining are, to be honest.
Well, usually you're trying to reduce the number of cuts you're making to achieve a final output shape, but the tapisserie style or technique results in something that doesn't result in just a final shape. It has a texture as well. So usually the goal of the mill is not to create a texture, but to carve out, you know, you've got the blocks or something, so we'll carve those out as to the accuracy that the machine is capable of, but to then apply because the tapisserie style, it's effectively tooling marks,
right?
It's sort of just a result of the tooling, while the result of CNC milling, you may still see tooling marks and normally go for a polish after that, but to try and leave a micro texture is interesting. I think there are processes available that do leave micro textures on steel, because I've seen it on my golf clubs. I don't know if you play golf, but what they've done in golf is, because they regulate how much the groove needs to be cut and how close together they are and what the valley and, you know, the dimensions of the trough. But there is a allowance for the area that isn't a cut groove. So the surface of the face of the club head, that isn't that has a certain specification that you know, it's not going to be perfect, right? So it's not going to be mirror polished, unbelievably flat to 0 microns. That can't be the rule. So a conforming club has a certain amount of variation that is allowed, and certain club makers actually machine in that level of variation to like within a micron of the specifications of the rule book, so that they have a micro texture in addition to just the grooves to get more grip onto the ball. So it is possible to create sort of very fine textures like you're talking about that would be needed in addition to creating the, I don't know, what do you call them, tetrahedrons or something that you need for the tapisserie style on the case.
So I think if you took a standard Royal Oak dial, the high points, like what I'm fascinated by is exactly what you're describing, like this machine pattern. Like you see the tool mark in the peaks and valleys of the dial,
Yes.
and it's just the tool marks are just so fine that it just reads as like this beautiful even texture. But it's two textures. So you see the texture of the waffle pattern, but then you also see the texture of the tool. And if you look close, I'm sure when you look at it with a loop, you could actually see the groove go up and down over the peaks and valleys. But if you were to take a dial, and put it on the surface that they use for black polishing, for example, like all those little squares that are raised, in theory, you could hone those down to be like a mirror polish. So you would have these valleys that were
rough.
were rough, and then you'd have these high points that are like these bright mirrors. And I'm sure AB has probably experimented with this over the years. Yeah, it's when you look at those now, it almost looks like a dome on the surface. Like it's almost like there's no flat at all. Like the peak of the square is just like a curve.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
But it makes me wonder how the Tissot PRX does its dial. I know we're talking like at a complete opposite end, right?
Stamp.
But
no stamping.
They have to. I mean, for $600, it's got to be stamped. Like, I find it hard to believe that it's machined out of a solid disc, even on a CNC machine at that price point, because the bracelets, like on the PRXs, the bracelets are actually they're not bad. So
they're nice. Yeah. I played around with a two-tone PRX because it had a white waffle dial, which is lovely, which isn't available on the regular steel, I think. It was really lovely. It was nice.
Yeah, I mean, also again, my reaction to it as stamping is it's not bashing. I think they're lovely watches for the money, and it's not like they made the claim that they are machining or pantograph cutting the dial, right? So they haven't made any false claims in that regard. I'm just making an educated guess that it is stamping because of that level. And like St. Peter said, the bracelet itself, as well as the Powermatic 80 movement, already provide a lot of value, even if you might not be particularly intrigued by the dial or the design in a more integral way. Yeah, that's a great watch.
So yeah, I'd imagine like if you applied this texture to, it's if you had taken, like if you take a Royal Oak link and then you leave a little bit of a border on the face of the link, so like maybe the tapisserie doesn't go all the way out to the ends of the link. It's like you leave maybe like a millimeter or like a half a millimeter of like flat surface there. Then you cut this into the link, and then you could then brush the top surface or polish it. Maybe, I mean, it's without actually seeing this material closer to understand, like, could you actually like hone the tops of those high points to get a polish on it? It's hard to say, because like for all we know, the depth that we're looking at there is like, I don't know what's that, like a half a thou.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? It's like who like this is blown up. It looks like they look like little mountains, but it could be nothing.
Yeah. It does look close to nothing.
Exactly. And because you could see that in the printing too. Like it's pretty amazing how they just print directly on that.
Yeah, I agree. Well, all kinds of printing really amaze me, honestly. Like it actually, well, yeah, quality printing on anything, full stop, amazes me. Even on the most pristine paper, to get ink and precisely where you want it as soon as you're off a 2D surface, or it's amazing to me. Just all types of print. White on black is still amazing.
What is the name of that that funny rubber transfer tool that they use for printing on the watch dials? Like it looks like It looks almost like a rubber balloon. You know, have you guys?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I think it's even seen in a couple of Rolex videos, but I think the Mr. Oh, who's the guy in London who makes those really weird watches that have no water resistance? One of the watches is an afternoon perfectly wasted or something like that, and the Joker. Well, no, that's in Victor watch, but Mr.
Chaikin?
No, that's a Russian guy,
Yeah,
not in London.
Konstantin Chaikin?
Yeah,
Chaikin?
No. These are very cheap watches, like direct order, about $250. But they have lovely dials. It's really the only difference between a lot of the watches is the dials, and they do use that process for printing, but the dials are a little bit more elaborate.
So I've seen that tool used in like earthware fabrication, also like printing on porcelain plates and that kind of stuff. So I think it's a pretty ubiquitous manufacturing process. I don't know what the name is. I will say though, one of the other pieces I have in my collection that was like really like the first very high end piece that I got is like a contemporary Datejust 41. And I got it before I even really like even handled or looked at that many modern Rolexes, like because I knew I just wanted one.
Wait, why did you said before that you were sort of like you mentioned the Submariner, and then the Datejust became your first piece.
The Datejust became my first piece because I walked into an AD and said I'm interested in Datejust Sub or Explorer, and that was like December of 2020 when production was like really slow, and it was like the whole like, oh well, we don't know who you are, there's no spend history kind of thing. And
for sure
I mean, they didn't say that to me, but I had heard all the stories about
that time period. 100% Datejust was possible. Explorer might have been possible, but maybe they just didn't have one around, or you didn't push for it. Maybe you looked at it at the same time.
Apparently there was someone in the store who came in just before me asking for one, and they were like, yeah, that guy just asked for one and we didn't have one for him either. It was like that kind of thing. But this was right before they discontinued the 39 millimeter Explorer 1. Like it was right before they launched they did the recent upgrade of both the Explorer 2 and the Explorer 1. I was more interested in the Polar Explorer 2, which is still like on my list of like core. Like I have a concept for like a core Rolex collection I'd like to build.
S tier. Yeah, absolutely.
And it's like so the Datejust, the cool thing, or at least about my experience, and I always tell people about it because they weren't like, oh well, we'll let you know when we have one. They basically allowed me to put in an order for the exact model that I wanted.
Right. That's nice, because I mean back then they could have easily just not cared.
Right. And I since have been told
either buy one of these or just get out of my face,
Yeah, exactly. I since have been told that even like the way that they did the deposit with me, like the store that I shop with, they like apparently they just don't even do that anymore. Like they just don't for like they'll take deposits for other watches, but on certain Rolex, they're just like, no, sorry, just
Yeah, I've heard mixed stories about being able to order again, like it was around July of last year that they stopped taking orders for anything, including day dates and Datejust. And then I heard a story about probably March or June of this year saying that they're opening orders again, but I've not seen anything come to fruition of someone ordering a Datejust and actually getting the one that they want, because we're talking about like the dials that are harder to get, like
green.
My wife wants the Palm DJ, the Palm motif.
Yep.
She still hasn't got it.
What color does she want?
Steel, so that would be in green.
Green steel, yeah, because they sell that in. Is it just gray and green, or do they have a blue, or they have a yellow one also, right? Like
there's a yellow with the two-tone.
Yellow two-tone, and then the gray is also two-tone, right? Like the gray palm motif is on like rose gold two-tone, I believe.
I'm not sure. Yeah,
I thought
you're probably right. It's probably the two-tone rose. Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, I think the mint green that they just introduced, I think it looks amazing with like different combinations, like fluted, Jubilee, oyster. Like I think that color is great. I ended up getting like, they call it slate now, but it's like what they used to call the dark rhodium.
I love slate. On every slate dial I've seen on every watch, it's one of the better dials. Although I wouldn't rate the Wimbledon super highly. Like there are other issues with the Wimbledon that I think it's not super great, but
the 9 o'clock baton has always rubbed me the wrong way. I know that's part of the charm of the watch, like it's supposed to be symmetrical with the date window, but man, that just, when I look at that hour marker, that one loomed hour marker, I'm just like, this just I don't know. It's like
a lot of the date justs under loom look weird because the dials end up, they're not all just stick dials, you know. A lot of them have like either diamonds or they might do something crazy. Like the new 28 Lady date just has like diamonds everywhere.
Right. Yeah, it's I'm really happy that I actually went this path because like I like this thing more and more every day that I wear it. I mean, I just love it. It's amazing. I mean, really the only thing I don't like about it is it's actually like a little large. Like the 41 size is like with the tonneau like type case, like these oyster cases, like they wear pretty big.
To me, yeah, you're right. It is pretty big. I don't believe there's much of a difference between 39 and 41. I believe they're both actually 39, but to me, at the 40 mil size, it needs to be a diver to justify its size. To me, it just needs more elements to justify occupying that much space. But there's no set rules to anything in life, so
right.
Like to me, the date just 36 would already be big to me on my wrist. Yeah, because I've got an Explorer 36 and I love the size of that. And the date just 36 is significantly bigger because I think it's about a 37 millimeter while the Explorer 36 is 35 millimeter.
What's the size of this Acrivia here?
This is actually a Recepi. He started, I think he bolstered his courage now that he won his second prize as well. This should be
they
38.
have it.
38.
They have it listed. It's funny. It's like he has his name on the dial, but they have it listed as Acrivia.
Well, Acrivia is the name of his workshop, basically.
I see. Okay.
It's technically not two separate brands, but you can make the argument that more or less when he does something more conventional, more traditional, he does put his own name. When it's something that's open worked and a little more steampunk, it usually simply is branded Acrivia. But you're right, it is entered as Atelier Acrivia. It's all the same, but I think increasingly he will start putting just his own name on the dial.
I think this particular reference and the one that came before this deserves all the praise that it's gotten and more. I think this is just an absolute knockout of how you do traditional watchmaking in a contemporary way and just make it beautiful. Like the outline, the way that he's outlined the Romans, and it alternates from like the top to bottom. It's like just these very, very subtle, like the sector, like it goes around the Romans on the outside and then on the it's so simple, but it just adds so much dynamism. And then whatever that texture is,
I think that's the subsidiary dial is meteorite. The rest is black grand feu enamel, including the paintings, which I mean that's a lot of art there. That is a very expensive watch for
That I
for a
thought
timeline.
in the sub-seconds area, I thought that was like a hand applied texture, but I
Is
might
it?
I don't know. That was I haven't actually done that much research on this piece, but I thought it's what it says.
Oh, you are right. It
Right.
says the case is paired with a fired enamel dial in piano black, lustrous, deep black with a glossy finish, with all the markings in ivory enamel. The black dial has a decorative detail apparent only up close. The seconds register is finished with a hand engraved gratte pattern that is then covered with translucent gray enamel. That's right.
So subtle. I mean, that like the cool thing about this is you could tell this is the kind of watch where like when you're holding it with a loop and you're looking at this stuff, like you're gonna just get sucked into all the detail in that thing. I mean, it just
That's amazing.
for such a simple for yeah, I don't know. I mean, I just immediately was captivated, and then just the finishing on this, like the huge anglage. Uh,
Right? Man.
it's so cool. When I really the turning point for me on this reference was when Gary G wrote the article about why he bought it, and you know, because he does all his like crazy macro photography, and I think he wrote an article about why he bought this piece for Quill and Pad, and he took a bunch of just stunning photos of the back of it. At least I think he bought it. I believe he did, but
I think so.
I know he photographed. He did some macro shots of the back of it, and it was his photographs and that got me to kind of look at it more closely.
And also I mean, the movement is not only aesthetics and finishing, it's also an 82 hour power reserve. You know, it's pretty
Is
impressive for
is it
that small watch. You know,
is it
38 millimeter, 8.75 thickness. It's two mainsprings, if I'm
yeah,
not mistaken.
two barrels, yeah, two barrels, right? Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, it's just really beautiful. So
And it's
he deserves it
deadbeat.
though.
It's deadbeat seconds and has this nifty function. Apparently, you know, people love asking for hacking seconds, right? So in
Mhm.
this one, when you pull out the crown to set the time, apparently the seconds just travels back to zero.
The
So you,
zero reset, as they call that. Longa does that on some of their pieces.
yeah,
I
it's a
know like
pretty.
the 18, I think the 1815 Tourbillon has a zero reset function on it.
And did you know that Ecepe is Bear Clooney? I'm sure he's really happy that he won the prize.
Sorry, you broke up for a second. What did he say?
I said that Ecepe is the favorite watchmaker of Bear Clooney of the Archiver. I'm sure he's really happy
Ah,
that a Kosovar Albanian won. won the
yeah, I'm sure he is. I'm sure he is.
prize.
But
Yeah.
this, you know, this guy's like he's really special. You know, you could tell in the interviews with him he seems like very humble. You know, for such an amazingly talented young
Oh yeah.
person.
But I mean, you know, that was initially the reason that he tried to find a fancy name for his brand rather than putting his own name, because he was shy about it. You know, just literally, I mean, if you listen to the interviews, he's basically saying I was just this immigrant kid, you know, I didn't think that my name was worthy to be on the dial. So it's actually wonderful, because the two watches that he made for this series, they are the ones that won him the prize. The previous version of this had won the prize, and this one won the prize as well. So it's amazing.
Yeah, it's very inspiring to see this. You know, I mean, I know obviously indies, of course, like there's the hype for all the indies and stuff, but just to see, you know, to see a young artist that just really is like true and honest to their vision, just take it and run with it and it get embraced by people. It's, you know, it's just a very like heartwarming experience for me as like someone who's like studied art, and had a lot of friends who have been artists, struggling artists trying to do their thing. But guys, I need to hit it. Thanks for the invitation. I
Hey, man.
always appreciate it. And
Nice to meet you.
yeah, it was great. It was great chatting. Hopefully I'll stop by soon, and we could
Please,
get into
and we are going to meet up once. I'm in New York for December, so I'm looking forward to that.
I'm planning on it. Titty bar, right?
Why not? Why not? I'm more of an ass man, but yes, that works.
All right,
too.
we'll go to the other one.
All right. Take care.
But I've wanted to I have a list of these 7 grails, right? Like, I know it's ridiculous that I have 7 of them, but I thought it was like, people always ask, like, in the watch YouTube, oh, if you could only have one watch, and most people always say that's an impossible question. So I already gave myself the luxury of imagining that I could have 7. So, like, I have this list. I think it's kind of interesting. It's like I don't own these things. I don't have the means to own them right now, but I think of it like a curation. Like, this list that I've made, it's like,
Of course,
if I could, it's a curation. So
since you're a Lego guy, I'm sure those pieces fit together in some way as well, not just a random mishmash of 7 different watches. I mean, the way you think, it implies to me that probably you have some principle to some order to that chaos.
I look forward to. Hopefully, I could share that with you sometime. I'll put together a PowerPoint.
I'd love to see it.
Great.
All right, guys. Have a good night.
Cheers.
Thank you, Saint Peter.
Yeah, be well.
Thanks for jumping on and talking to us about watches and MBNF specifically.
Cheers. Enjoy.
Bye, man.
It's
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's interesting. He's got obviously a clear idea of what would be an immense collection. 7 watches at that level of desirability is quite a lot, but it's kind of interesting. It's not how I went about my collection, even though I did specify at the very beginning which are the top watches that I wanted. At no point did I, how would we say, I never assumed I was going to get any more watches than the next one. As in, if I had started and I could have easily stopped at the Submariner. The next one was my true grail, which I felt like at the time contemporary grail, as in, like, I felt that the Batgirl was like the best
Daytona,
watch Rolex has. No, the Batgirl.
No?
Yeah, and then I got the Batgirl like a few weeks later, and that would have been enough as well. Like, after the Submariner, I told my wife, like, we could just stop here. You know what I mean? There's watches that would be lovely, but we could just stop here.
And you had of course the Yachtmaster Everose 37
for my wife. Yeah, and that would have been enough for her. The Submariner would have been enough for me, and then but it was interesting that St. Peter talked about a how would you say, a normie media article on watches got him back into watches, and it was kind of the same for me. My first era was like 2007, and I really got into it, but I didn't buy anything. Quite frankly, I didn't have enough money. It wouldn't have been wise. I could have done it, but it just wouldn't have been a good idea. But it wasn't until like 2015, 2016 when I saw like this article talking about this watch that seemed to have some abbreviation of Berliner, BLNR. I'm like, what on earth are these 4 letters at the end? Just talking about how ridiculously hard it has been to get a BLNR. That sort of rekindled my interest in watches in general. And I didn't go to Rolex immediately. I just started looking at watches again. I'm like, you know what? I should really think about wearing something that looks and resembles a watch. Like, how much do I really want, a good quality watch, and start contemplating it. So it is interesting where and how you end up at places, but certainly what a collection should look like at the very end is,
Mm.
I don't know, is it less or more than the individual watches?
Honestly,
Does
I approach it in a way like you did, because in life too, I try to stay in the moment. I
yeah,
try to stay in the present. I try not to get carried away too much and project excessively into the future.
yeah,
So I have certain visions and ideas about what my perfect collection would look like, and I would never let into that collection, even as I'm working piece by piece, something that I would not want to own 10, 15 years from now, that's for sure.
right,
But still, I work on it piece by piece. I always look at it as the next one. So what could be the next one? Not necessarily what is my next watch, period, and I'm not gonna look at anything else. But what
yeah,
would be one or two logical steps to go next from here, from what I have? Not
mm,
necessarily chasing after the next one unnecessarily, but is it a complication? Do I want this watch to represent some aspect of horology that I have been so passionate about? Right, and I can explain that very quickly, right? When I
mm,
finally decided, for example, that I was going to get a chronograph, that's when I went for Breguet Type 20, even though
mm,
that had a lot to do with the fact that I found a great deal on it. And then the next piece I got, which was again a chronograph, that minuscule Lemania 1940s piece in gold. That was because it had the CH27, right? Which basically was the base caliber of every other significant chronograph from the 20th century, from the humble Omega Speedmaster that became the Moonwatch, to generations of Patek Philippe perpetual calendar chronographs. They all had the
mm,
CH27 base. So it just made sense for me to get a watch that had that base caliber. So I
mm,
look at it like that. At any point in time, I have, two, three things that I'm contemplating like that. And it's about finding a good deal and finding something that fits with what I already have and what I aspire to in terms of wristwatches.
mm. Yeah, the more I look at your Type 20, I would say if I could swap my Man in the Moon for it, I would. I don't know if you got it that cheap, but
Yeah,
uh,
pretty much. I mean, 4K, it's not
oh
inaccessible.
wow, okay, yeah, it's a very
And
good deal.
in this market, you can certainly find one for that. My connections helped, but it's not impossible to find one at 4.5 right now. And
Mm,
with good negotiation tactics, you might just walk away with 4 without having a particular affinity
hmm.
to that particular seller.
Yes, yeah. The
So
I don't know if you talk about Arch, but it seems like he hasn't even taken a breath after getting the 3861.
mm, yeah, I don't say any bad things about Archie Luxury. That's my
Sure.
main principle. Because
Oh, I mean, it's sort of
he
like
has a
he's in the same process where it's like next, 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 but his approach is certainly extremely collection focused and not so much this is the watch that I highly desire and it would be the best day to get this watch in particular.
Mhm.
Um, it seems like he won't be at all happy until he has a full collection, which your collection is full at 1, and then it just gets more full
Yeah.
again at 2, and more full
Although
again at
although
3.
I have to say it's one of my. I don't necessarily resent that question. What would be the one watch? But when
Mm,
people
mm,
say one watch collection, That's my pet peeve. One watch is one watch. That's not a collection. That's the whole purpose of it, in fact. If you can settle for one watch, it means you don't need a collection.
Right.
So I think it's important to separate that, especially if you really want to ask that question. Okay, so what would be the one watch that can make you walk away and drop everything else? And for me, actually, I was fortunate enough that that one watch was something that was given to me, that I inherited, and that I already know
Yeah.
I will never have a better watch than that, and it's this one. I'll never have a better watch. That's it. I could be happy, if everything else, God forbid, but if everything else was lost and I was left with this, I would just walk away.
My personal collection's a little bit weird in that most of the pieces, you could have as your one watch and not really care about anything else. It's very weird because I'm so happy when I put one of them on and I think I could really just live with just this one, but then there's another 7 that are in the same category. I put it on. I was like, why do I need any of the other watches? Well, they all fit the same thing, where they're all relatively, tool watches with some versatility. The only exceptions are probably the Pelagos, which is extreme tool watch, and the Explorer 2, which I also think is an extreme tool watch. I know Archie and maybe even yourself think it's more versatile, but you're talking about a different watch. The 16570 is a completely different watch in my book. With its size being the way that it is, it's just more versatile.
The smaller, our version of it, 5-digit.
Yeah. Far more versatile. Far more versatile. Far more closer to a watch that you could live with every day and not worry about it. The new Explorer 2 is its own kind of thing. It's a beast,
Yeah, I mean, it's a great watch. Again, that's one of the watches that actually made me a collector in a way, because that was my third watch. So for me, the sub I got because it was my father's watch. The root beer GMT, for me, it was something that I aspired to, that I saved for, that I toiled in the dusty library stacking books and got for myself. But it wasn't until I started watching Archie and ended up getting a Polar, when they were the dogs of the range, when they were extremely undesired. It wasn't until then that I became a collector per se, right? I've been in the world of watches since I was 18, in a serious way, but I was just geeking out for the most part until I got my third watch. Yeah. So that 16570 is the one that turned me, that made that click, that turned me into a collector rather than just a nerd who likes watches. So we discussed a few of these already. We mentioned the Challenge Watch Prize was won by the MAD editions. That's the category for under 4K in USD, and I think 3,500 in Swiss francs. Petite Aiguille was the under 10K. That was won by the Trilobe with these constantly rotating 3 rings to express hours, minutes, and seconds. Both of these very interesting watches. Not necessarily my cup of tea, but I can see the appeal, and I can see the kind of in a way, innovation they bring at these price points. So I do appreciate them. The horological revelation was the Sylvain Pinot for the Origine. The Audacity Prize was won with Octofinissimo Ultra, the 10th anniversary Octofinissimo by Bulgari, which was, until Richard Mille took it from them, the thinnest wristwatch ever made. And we have also, in a way, started talking about the Atelier Acrivia, which is the Recep Recepi chronomètre contemporain, who won the Men's Watch Prize, which is great and a great record for Recep Recepi as well, because his previous iteration of this model had won the Men's Watch Prize in 2018. So that's a pretty good batting average, you know, that he is 2 out of 2 with the watches that carry his proper name on the dial, which is really a beautiful, beautiful story. If you don't know about Recep Recepi's story, there are so many good interviews with him, but I think the best one still is the Revolution interview with him that Wei Ko did. A great conversation, and really gives you an insight into him as a young, still a very young man, and already a very accomplished and well decorated watchmaker. Now, I think the next one can give us an occasion to kind of lay out my misgivings about some of the categories, you know, especially this arbitrary distinction between ladies and men's, since Hermes literally won the complication prize in both with the same complication, just in different size. The ladies one actually is the more wearable version, as it happens. It's in stainless steel, which is always more preferable, cased in what is very popular for Hermes, the arceau, this kind of asymmetric design. And this has basically a traveling dial, right? That's with
That's cool.
every push goes to the different time zone, as well as, of course, changing the time.
So is this more like a GMT or a world time? I'm not understanding what's indicating what.
So this is a GMT. Sorry, this is a world time, because
It's a world time.
It actually, you know, with every push, both the time changes and the time zone changes. So you both get to jump hours and change the local time. And then you can set the home time here at 12 o'clock separately. Right?
How
local
unique.
time.
That's
Yeah,
very
local
cool.
time travels around the dial, and home time is up there. I think it's a very nice expression of the complication. I think in steel it's beautiful, very, very wearable, and somewhat, like, you know, for an Hermes watch at least, and for a world time watch, it's not too outrageously priced either. It's 20K. So 38 millimeters, 12.41 millimeters in thickness. And I think it wears slightly larger than 38, since Arceau has an interesting wrist presence as well, with that extended upper lugs. And yeah, basically they won this, with this watch, they won the ladies complication. And then with the larger version of it, which literally is platinum. I think platinum lugs and titanium case. I think that's basically the only difference, and it's in 41 millimeters. Probably the way the dial is treated is a little different as well, but not much more than that. Yeah, kind of exposes again the categories a little bit, because why need two different complications categories? I mean, especially if the only distinction you are going to make is the sizing of the watch. You're not talking about
maybe so one of the things that happens with respect to competition is that the awards can either be chasing the industry or can be pushing the industry into new areas. And I think just in general, ladies are often deprived of any mechanical movement, like we just said, with respect to Cartier, who will consistently put quartz movements in anything that they think a woman might wear.
right.
And that by having a woman's complication just ensures that that watchmakers are not ignoring women when they make an interesting complication. And while the outcome here looks frivolous, I guess, with 2 awards, they could have. Well, Hermes wouldn't have, but they could have. The winners, could have easily not made, ladies appropriate stuff. I won't say sizing in particular because it's not that cut and dry, but it may be just a way for them to ensure that ladies are getting complications.
I think you introduced a very important perspective that was lost on me, to be completely frank. So that's a very good point for me. Again, not to contest what you said, the feat when it comes to complications is in a way almost always how small things can get, right? In 1941, it was an amazing feat for Patek to fit a perpetual calendar chronograph into a case that was smaller than 35 millimeters when they came out with 1518, right? Because that was the kind of complication reserved for pocket watches in serial production until then. In a similar way, when at the turn of the millennium, I think it was 98 when he produced the first prototype, when F.B. Jean made his chronomètre résonance. The resonance phenomenon was really, it came into the watch world with Breguet's pocket watch, which was I think maybe more than 50 millimeters in diameter, that particular watch. So the feat in that case was to fit 2 separate watch calibers, basically, into a single 40 millimeter case. So for me, it's always more impressive anyways to have the same complication, but make it smaller. It's really artisanship anyways, watchmaking, right? So it's when the scale is smaller, you just have more work. You need more ingenuity. You need more handcraft. But yes, I do understand now the issue from a very different perspective that I hadn't considered, thanks to you.
Yeah, it happens a lot, like in firearms, basically. That the sport that I'm in is USPSA, and a lot of the categories that were set up are chased by the manufacturers to have the top firearm for that particular set of requirements, and it's so gamed out now that the best-selling firearms are the ones that are gaming out those categories, and you see like them look at new categories to add to the competition, and they're both concerned about whether or not the competitors who will shoot these matches will be able to, one, access firearms. Like, what is the cost of them? Does it make any sense to have such a category? Does anyone want to do that? And whether or not manufacturers are open to producing more firearms tailor-made for that category. And I think in general, most of it is around giving people what they want. So even though it's a sport, the thing that seems to drive it is the stuff that would be popular for average consumers. Even though it's a competition-driven thing, they're saying like, can you fit a really, really good gun in a tiny amount of space with an optic or something like that? So a similar thing could be happening in other competition spheres where there's a technical and industrial component to it.
I think you have a great parallel and a little bit of a divergence, in the sense I completely agree with you. In the horological world, GPHG is in a way an engine for innovation. I think with their categories and with what they end up highlighting, they are encouraging brands and watchmakers that do something different within each category, that do bring something new to the table. On the other hand, I don't think they really affect that significantly customer behavior necessarily.
Right.
For the niche boutique brands, it might be a way, for the independents, it might be a way to finally establish a certain equity where more people will come to them to get their products. So that is good business for them. But by and large, I don't think they really drive the best-selling categories necessarily.
These aren't
because
crowd pleasers, basically.
The best selling is Rolex, basically. And that's not, Rolex almost never wins an award, even though Tudor does. But we can talk about that next. That could be a great.
It is funny, but I mean the other parallel to that is I would say Friends, like that awful sitcom, whereby, you know, most successful sitcom of all time, but its formula is so trite that any sitcom that attempted to do anything that looked similar to Friends was sort of like, oh, it's a Friends knockoff, and was otherwise too boring. But and so there was basically no sitcoms that were even trying to do the same formula. But in almost every other industry, I'd say, or any kind of product category, you normally have a 1, 2, and 3, and sometimes they're hard to discern, but it's what people want. So yeah, it is funny that what the majority of people want may actually be pretty bland and uninteresting, but yeah, take that for what you will.
Well, I mean, not to turn this into a sitcom discussion, but after Friends, I guess, How I Met Your Mother, which is kind of, if you really be strict about it, that is a Friends knockoff. That was really
it is, but it, like, I think like 10 years separated. It's like like no one attempted to try do it at the same time, but if they actually did, they may have actually been more successful, because it's not like Friends was doing anything crazy special with that premise, that setup, that situation. Like How I Met Your Mother could have easily beaten Friends in the same time period. Clearly, it would have been different actors because the time separation is so large.
Yeah. I mean, look, the thing is, it's a lot of times these things, I think, are lightning in a bottle, because, in hindsight, of course, you recognize a lot of these actors, especially Jennifer Aniston, went on great lengths afterwards, but I don't think they really thought they had something great at the very beginning. I don't think it was that sort of lab created project even. So you're right. Maybe it wasn't entirely original, but it wasn't necessarily a winning formula at the start either. That sort of ensemble cast, where you really did not have a single protagonist. That wasn't completely new, but it wasn't that's equal either between the different characters. I think, like when you think of what's that show that's with Fonzie, that Fraser
Happy Days.
grew out of. Happy Days. Yeah, you can say Happy Days is kind of a predecessor of Friends, I guess. But yeah,
it is funny. Like some people some industries are scared of trying to be and also ran basically, but honestly, what people want probably is 2 or 3 also rans. I think it's quite troubling when there aren't at least a few similar options, and then allowing you to pick which one's best out of these bland options. Like at the moment, I'm showing my wife to different jewelry stores to get an eternity ring for our 10th anniversary, and the one that's leading right now is so different to all the other ones. I'm like, the only thing that's troubling is like there's no close second. Like this should be a hard decision, you know, and it there's one that's she thinks is much better. Not that she's fully in love with it and must have it, but just sort of like this one's clearly better, but there's nothing that's even second yet.
That's interesting. I would love to follow up on that discussion on some other occasion, but what do you think about the Pelagos FXD winning the divers watch category?
Excellent choice. It's hard for anything else to win just from the perspective of removing the spring bars is such a fundamental and important negation of the most of the weakest link of every watch. You know, the spring bars are terrible. Like in terms of the whole concept of them, that you're going to hold on to a watch with these little tiny holes and a spring-loaded, you know, tiny little mechanism. So yeah, I've had a watch spring bars fail on me before, and I was thankful that I had a NATO strap at the time, so it was just such a dangling watch. But certainly,
By the way, they aren't averse to that, because last year I remember, and I will bring it up immediately now, it was the Louis Vuitton street diver that won, and that has a very unique lug structure as well. That's kind of proprietary. They have different straps for it that you can get from them, but once again, you know, it's not something that you can accessorize the way that people accessorize their dive watches often, which is one of the appeal, right? You know, accessorizing, modding, etc., is what put diver watches at the kind of vanguard of the hobby for the longest time, in terms of accessibility, in terms of modifiability, in terms of the diversity. But yeah, these have the quick, quick, what do you say, quick change kind of mechanism, but they are proprietary as well.
Yeah, so the FXD gets a lot of things right. It's not pretentious enough to put the helium escape valve on and still call itself a professional dive watch. Well, I'm not joking. Like, I mean, saturation diving is just one type of professional diving that's extremely specific to people who are basically working on oil rig stuff.
That's right.
There's a whole bunch of other professional diving that doesn't involve saturation diving. And this really tailors for exactly that. So they've got a spec they built directly for it, unashamedly, eschewing one of the best bracelets in the business in the process. And you have the absolutely no nonsense FXD. yeah, it's a really great diver.
Yeah, I like I like the Pelagos line a lot. Perhaps look, I mean, I love the Black Bay 58 bronze and a lot of other
Mm,
Black Bays as well, but Pelagos as a holistic lineup, I don't think I have one in there that I don't like.
mm,
I like the LHD, I like the blue with the full titanium bracelet. I like the FXD as well, especially because
yeah.
it's a no date, so it has this great balanced look with the entirely graduated rotating bezel as well.
I think the weakest in terms of identity is the Pelagos 39, but it it's like the also ran of Friends. You know what I mean? It's so similar to every other diver. It's 100% a Tudor Submariner, basically. And so in a lot of ways, it's sort of the least distinctive Pelagos, but at least from what my AD tells me, unbelievably hot.
Yeah, yeah.
Just off the charts hot. Um, so yeah, it's really, I've really enjoyed seeing a revitalization of the Pelagos line with the release of the FXD and
Mhm.
the Pelagos 39 now, because it I think they were genuinely underappreciated um, so far until the FXD's release. And then, you know what? I've not seen a single Pelagos in the case in any of the ADs
That's
where I'm
right.
at. No, I can see the other ones. I can see Black Bay Pros now. I can see Black Bay Chronos even. I do not see any shape or form of a Pelagos in the case these days.
Yeah. Um, I think it was with you that we had this discussion. When did the Pelagos come out? It actually coincides with the Black
That's
Bay
old.
Heritage as
Yeah.
well. Yeah, it's like it's also celebrating a decade now. So you're right. It's about time that it takes the role it deserves within the Tudor
Yeah.
lineup and within the Tudor range of watches. And I appreciate the fact that Tudor is very responsible towards its own heritage, towards the archive of models and inspirations that it holds as the heritage arm of the Rolex machine, of the Wilsdorf machine.
Mm,
Um, but also pushes things forward because it's also the experimental arm, the material experimentation,
yeah.
transfers, the kind of design touches transfer from Tudor to Rolex as well. Black Bay Ceramic was a winner in the last year, for example,
Hmm.
in the grand prize. So Tudor keeps winning, even though Rolex doesn't necessarily in GPHG. So it's great. It's good to know.
Yeah, well, it's funny. With the For some reason, I see, and it's I can articulate it, but the Tudor Pelagos LHD justifies its existence far better than the GMT left-hand drive, the Sprite, and I think it's because they did what they need to do to get that watch what it needed to do, i.e., it moved the crown over to the left because it helps protect it when you're doing professional stuff.
Yeah.
But they didn't go to the next step and like switch the date window around for no reason. You know what I mean? So
Right.
it sort of it it didn't sort of show its playing card. Here we're playing we're flipping things around. Aha, we flipped everything around. It's the LHD for Pelagos clearly has a reason for its existence, while
Yeah,
the
and I
Sprite sort of
think
reveals its hand. It's like we flip the date as well. It's like,
that's
do
why.
people need that?
By the way, Ozzy, that's why that utility is why historically left hand driven divers existed in larger numbers in the Rolex lineup as well. I'm not
Exactly.
talking about more generally. In the Rolex lineup, there were custom made, personal order, special occasion, oysters and GMT masters that were left-handed, not completely flipped over or inverted, like you said, but with crowns at 9 o'clock. But with divers, there was basically in every batch that was mil spec, that was commercially issued, there's always some that were made that way, whether it was for left-handed divers or simply for purposes of not getting in the way
Protection, yeah.
when you are doing something more intricate and dynamic with your hands. Could be.
Yeah, it's just there's no confused identity of the Pelagos LHD. Like it's basically about an even more protected crown. While the Sprite has a couple of problems, like they flip the date. It's hard to describe for what purpose you would need to flip the date other than this looks wackier. But then the GMT itself has a movement, a complication that requires you to use the crown on quote unquote a regular basis. Now, not everyone's flying around, but it's got the jumping hour hand. You're meant to use it, Meanwhile, an automatic diver is not one where you would open that crown very often at all. And so putting on the left is not an issue.
The confusing thing about that watch is Rolex doesn't, I won't say vehemently denies, but when you look at the publicity material and even internal documents that I actually used on this channel, for marketing purposes that they share with their authorized dealers, there's no reference to it as a as a watch that is supposed to be worn on the right hand. Because when you look at it that way, and if you're wearing something long sleeve, it doesn't have to be a dress shirt necessarily. But if the date window isn't flipped over, it would be at all times covered by your shirt and would be much more difficult to actually look at.
Interesting.
Right? If you're wearing it on your right hand and the dial, the date window is not flipped over, it would be more difficult and less convenient to check out. That's the only way I can justify it.
Yeah.
Again, not a strong argument for it,
yeah.
but that's the only thing that comes to mind. The jewelry watch price was worn by a classic, again, quite an icon, the Serpenti. This is, wow, man. I mean, it's even on a silly photograph, it's a pretty incredible looking watch. That the way they use turquoise and the diamonds, I think, is pretty impressive. Looks alive almost, right? The scales and the rubies as eyes. It's beautiful. Yeah, I know people go crazy about the Tank as the ultimate quote unquote woman's watch, but I think Serpenti certainly has a great case to be made there. And I think, let's see if they are actually explaining this, but I think you can actually remove the piece from there, from the mouth of the snake.
For what purpose?
Well, I guess to wind it to begin with, because it's a hand wound piece, and it would be extremely inconvenient to try to reach and exactly where when it's actually in the snake. Look at it. I mean, doesn't particularly seem a convenient winding structure.
I don't know. The snake looks a little wacky to me.
In a good way or a bad way? It's a snake.
Well, almost anthropomorphized. Sorry, as in he looks
For sure.
happy. It's like,
Right? Yeah.
I know,
I mean, I would
just
be honestly, I would be happy too if I were covered with pavé diamond. So maybe it's because of that. It's properly gem set, so it it's happy about that possibly. Yeah, this is, I mean, again, beautiful piece, $250,000, obviously a true jewelry piece. I don't know if it's articulating in a way. Is it simply a bracelet with beautiful diamond setting and the contrast that's created by the turquoise and the rubies and the other kind of open work of pattern? It looks like a gorgeous project, and it is actually including one of the smallest hand-wound calibers in there in the timepiece portion of the piece, so well deserved. I want to take a closer look at this artistic crafts piece. This is another world time, the Voutilainen GQ. The dial looks amazing, like a kaleidoscope or something. Or like some sort of futuristic stained glass work.
That's very, very small. What do they describe the dial as being? It's very, very small. It's constructed from, for sure.
It's Japanese lacquer. So it says one of the greatest lacquer artists of Japan, Tatsuo Kitamura, creates works of lacquer art that stand at the pinnacle of Japanese tradition. It brings a craft that has existed for hundreds of years into the present, exemplifying the passion to preserve the soul, spirit, and identity of traditional Japanese culture as expressed in the Edo period. I'm guessing that all those are like small shards that are independently lacquered, possibly, or at least independently set. Perhaps he lacquers, the same colors separately, and then cuts them precisely and mixes them up. One has to. There must be a video for this. Maybe not in the submission though. So let me see if I can find something. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know where to begin. That is very, very small. Basically, it's very, very, very small. I struggle to imagine it being done by hand. The lines are all very straight. Even setting individual pieces that straight would be a massive feat. There's a lot of work.
Okay, I found a GPHG video, but it doesn't really have anything to show for the setting. But it's very impressive, the dimensions of that multicolor lacquer. So let's take a look for that for a second. Look at that.
Wow, plays with the light. Very interesting.
And it's like they're not evenly set, it seems, right? Did you see that?
Yeah,
like
there's forms of
different
texture.
like, what was the name of the artist again? Tatsuo Kitamura. Let's see if there's
How many of these were produced? I can't imagine this is mass production.
I don't know. I don't know. Let's see. I mean, I don't know about that, but I think Voutilainen himself doesn't produce, I don't think, more than 40 watches maybe per year. Like I don't think more than a few dozen watches come out of his workshop to begin with. So these would be quite selective. And as far as I know, yeah, the price is 365,000. Oh, it says one piece limited series. Okay, it's
one of one.
Okay, one of one.
Wow.
Let's see, Tatsuo Kitamura. Let's see if I can find the video of him. No, there's a YouTube channel with the name Tatsuo Kitamura, but it has videos of little kids playing golf, and it has one subscriber. So I don't know if that's
certainly not a crowd pleaser. This one.
Yeah. By the way, speaking of Voutilainen, Nick Fox just came out with a great little article on him in the Financial Times that came out 2 days ago, and with reference to his origins in Lapland, Finland. Nick Fox has called him the Santa Claus of horology, since Santa Claus is supposed to have come from the same region. And yeah, he's a watchmaker whose output of about 70 timepieces a year, no two exactly alike, is in inverse proportion to his cultural significance. So predictable are his victories at the Grand Prix d'Horlogerie de Genève that I once suggested they might as well name one of the awards the Voutilainen Prize and present it to him every year. So far, 8 GPHG trophies. I think this is the 9th, and sundry other awards line the walls of his workshop, perched on a rocky crag high above Motier in Switzerland, a short ride from where he lives in a sprawling, slightly spooky Art Nouveau villa. This home, by the way, it does look very spooky, like in a like a quaint home in a European arts horror movie kind of vibe, for sure. Yeah, I'll send the link.
A slightly upmarket shining is taking place here.
Evan, you can be the second if you would like to. If you'd like to super chat, you would be the second. Yes, so check it out. I think I sent the link right there. So it is a great article. It's very informative, and as always, it's a Nick Fox piece, so it's very well written and a great piece from a stylistic standpoint as well. But this was the Platinum Voutilainen World Time GQ with that special lacquer artwork at the center of the dial. And it has actually Motier on the dial rather than Geneva or Paris. So gotta give it to Kari Voutilainen for repping his adopted home. Speaking of people and brands that keep winning GPHG awards, here's Ferdinand Berthoud that won yet another award. I think Scheufele between Chopard and Berthoud has already a handful. This was, I think, a limited, 20-piece limited series of their second chapter, the the FB2. It is the watch that combines remontoir d'égalité, stopworks, and as far as I know, also a tourbillon in this case. So the principle being constant force, power reserve of 53 hours. Again, $250,000, basically 270,000 Swiss francs, even more, I should say. But one of the amazing things about these watches, and you cannot do it otherwise anyways in Switzerland, since they call themselves chronomètre, they are actually COSC certified. So a lot of these artistic machines you find from high horological makers, of course, they are chronometer level, but Berthoud always also gets them COSC certified just to prove a point in a way.
Okay, Lord. I've got a day of work tomorrow, unfortunately.
Okay.
I gotta wrap things up here. I really appreciate your time and meeting and speaking to St. Peter as well.
Hey, man.
It was a fun chat.
Thank you so much for dropping by. I hope I will see you again, at least in a couple of days, but no pressure.
Cheers. No worries.
Take care, Ozzy. Bye. All right. So this is the Mechanical Exception Award. Truly, I think worthy of this award, because this is a machine where you have not one, not two, but three regulation mechanisms, really, all of which are outmoded. So Berthoud is really about putting obstacles in front of you where you don't necessarily need them, and they do make exceptional watches indeed, with basically based on the principle of chronometry, based on the principle of constant force, where you have, again, a fusée and chain mechanism, a stopworks mechanism, and I think as well remontoir, but I might be mistaken that I'm realizing right now. That's possible. Let's see. No, maybe this one doesn't have a remontoir. So the constant force mechanism is just fusée and chain in this case then. Okay, and then you have the tourbillon, of course, that's only visible on the case back. Hours, minutes, and the seconds. Next up, we have the chronograph prize that went to 1941 Chronograph in tantalum. Tantalum, as you know, is a metal that's not so rarely used anymore, but that's certainly not a mainstream material for cases. Audemars Piguet used to make a lot of two-tone watches in tantalum and pink gold. Of course, famously, FB Jaune uses tantalum in their chronomètre, bleu, which is quite fitting, of course, because tantalum is distinguished by this gray bluish tint that it has. Here it's mirror polished and scalloped at the lugs. Quite a bit of dimension to this watch already in the case. Of course, Grönefeld is a Dutch maker, started by the two brothers whose provenance can be led back to that interesting workshop, Renaud et Papy, Audemars Piguet's special movements workshop now. That's where Richard Mille's technical innovations come from. That's where a lot of the exciting watchmakers that we recognize today have somehow had their first kind of head start. And Groeneveld's 1941 chronograph was the watch that won the chronograph category. It's a watch that's from a 25-piece limited series and costs $180,500. The chronological brothers, Groeneveld. Let's see what they describe as the unique features of this watch. It's a little larger, apparently, than their usual 1941 case. In tantalum, which is hard, corrosion resistant, bioinert, and has that lustrous blue-gray gleam. The dial layout, of course, is interesting, of these three separate dials of varying size. A 30-minute counter located at the base of the dial features a Breguet-style hand and is equipped with an instantaneous jumping minutes, conferring ease of read-off. A subsidiary seconds display resides at 9 o'clock, while a power reserve indicator positioned above is equipped with a pointer seemingly floating adjacent a track, conveying the status of the mainspring. That's nice. Breguet-style central chronograph seconds hand converses with a crisply marked track positioned on the rejo, proclaiming the elapsed seconds in an intelligible format. I think it's really the finishing that is the final touch in this case of the 45 jewel movement. Bondage never comes to my show, Evan. So I haven't seen him tonight. I haven't seen him ever on this show, in fact. The Tourbillon watch prize went to H. Moser et Company. This is the Pioneer cylindrical tourbillon skeleton, an entirely open-worked dial with a subsidiary dial that acts for hours and minutes. And of course, what you have is a tourbillon, so it basically acts as your seconds, right? Since it makes a turn every 60 seconds. I think this is a very handsome looking watch as well. I like H Mosa when it's simple, when it's really not trying too hard to troll or whatever it is they think they're doing with some of their designs. I'm absolutely not a fan of the streamliner, and I know that isn't making me pretty popular. Especially, I don't want to offend my friend St. Peter, who probably has the streamliner as one of his 7 grails. So, but when it comes to their simpler dress watch designs with their characteristic fumé / smoked finished dials, I like them a lot, and this basically preserves that dial, just shrinks it to the higher half of the case as a kind of subsidiary dial, and lets you admire the entire mechanism. And since the rotor is skeletonized, you also have a similar way of enjoying the intricacies of the movement from the back as well, almost entirely see-through, which is a rare find indeed. For the iconic watch prize, it was Tag Heuer Monaco collaboration with Gulf. Of course, the Tag Heuer Monaco is one of those watches in its original inspiration, in its original release, associated with that proper name, Steve McQueen, the King of Cool. He mostly wore 5512 and 5513s, Rolex Submariners, but for the filming of the movie Le Mans, he actually wore an Heuer Monaco. Heuer Monaco was the first waterproof chronograph with an integrated self-winding movement. So it presented an important marker in the advancement of horology, and certainly in the recent history of chronographs. Gulf, of course, you will recognize from the livery that Steve McQueen was wearing in that movie. So Monaco's with any accent from Gulf usually are taken well by the collectors. In this case, it has both the colors and stripes, but also the Gulf logo there right above the date window and within basically the running seconds. For me, honestly, I love the Monaco. I think the case shape is truly iconic. So what better what better recipient for for the iconic watch prize? But I like less adorned versions, the ones that are more recognizable as the original, which Tag actually does a decent job with them, divesting themselves from the picture, even where they have just a Hoya logo in the vintage style without even tag. I miss those. This is a little too busy and too colorful for me for a Monaco, but still, you won't have my objection for this particular watch winning the iconic category. This is a piece that retails for 72.50 in Swiss francs. So the next one is the calendar and astronomy. This is crayon anywhere. Not the, I think not the best name that you could come up with for a new watch brand, but hey, it works for them. It got them at least to this prize. The movement finishing looks really good and very exciting. The anglage is lovely. And this basically has, of course, in addition to the hours, minutes, and the dates, of course, the month, as you can see right here in a concentric circle within the pointer dates, the day and night indicator, and of course, the time for sunrise and sunset as well. And it really displays them in a way that's very intuitive, and that's not usually the case with this sunrise time and sunset time kind of complication. It's usually much more complex. This has a very intuitive and natural way of displaying the sunrise and sunset. So I think in this case too, it's quite well deserved. You have certainly a lot of art and craft that goes into it as well that you can ascertain from the finishing. White gold case, a lovely dial where everything seems to be emanating from that month and date indicator. 72 hours of power reserve with a 3 Hz beating caliber. Hefty price tag, but still 125,000. Still, I'm sure lots to look for from crayon as years pass by. The guilloche work seems pretty lovely. This is their day. This is their night. A nicely decorated dial, beautifully designed case, and artfully finished movements, all the markings of high horology. We're almost done. We have, of course, the mechanical clock prize, which they give, and in this case, they gave it to the Fontaine aux Oiseaux, like a bird bath type of clock. Oh, where is it? There's a little video of it from when it was introduced at Watches and Wonders. So there it is. It's really very cute and quite artful. And it is a timepiece as well. After all, it is a desk clock. So quite lovely. As far as I understand it, the time is really shown at the edge, so it doesn't have much to do with the fountain. The bird bath or the fountain is really for aesthetic purposes. That's quite cute, for sure. And one of a kind, yet without even a settled price tag, somewhere between 5 to 10 million Swiss francs. Very, very interesting indeed. this was another watch that I highlighted. By the way, a lot of these watches, the Hermès's new Arceau Le Temps Voyageur was a watch that I highlighted on this show before as a strong contender. I talked a lot about Ferdinand Berthoud watches, of course, since they were so nice to me in the Chopard boutique at South Coast Plaza to invite me to their special event where I could, in fact, look at the entire range, except for this watch, really. But I was very happy that they won an award there, and I'm very happy that I was able to highlight and showcase the brands before they have received the most recent version of the award. And of course, we have also talked about the Bulgari Octofinissimo Ultra on this channel as well. But certainly, most recently, we had talked about Parmigiani Fleurier as a brand and how with the new Tonda PF automatic, they have accomplished something more than simply coming up with a reduced size version of what already exists in their catalog. And this particular version of it, the 36 millimeter in pink gold with what they call a deep ruby dial and with baguette diamonds as their abbreviated index markers, I think is a very exciting watch. First of all, it makes what is an integrated bracelet design a little more universally wearable. Of course, the 40 millimeter version is still quite accessible and quite wearable for a lot of people. It fits fine on my wrist. I do love it, and we'll talk a little bit about the differences because on one perspective, the Tonda PF automatic may be seen as a reduced sized and a more feminine version of the Tonda PF micro rotor, and that's in a way why it was nominated in the ladies category. It scales around 36 millimeter in case diameter, a significant reduction from the 40 millimeter sizing of the original. The integral cohesion of the case and bracelet makes the timepiece to still retain a unique and significant presence on the wrist, however, right? Even when it is at 36 millimeters. Yet in important ways, the automatic is also so much more than a smaller version of the micro rotor. From the abbreviated index markers, alternatively rendered in baguette cut diamonds or 18 karat rhodium plated gold, because this watch actually has a stainless steel version that has simply the abbreviated index markers in rhodium plated gold. Let me see. To the skeletonized hands, so from the abbreviated index markers to the skeletonized hands to the streamlined medallion PF logo, everything on the face of the timepiece is designed to showcase the uniquely beautiful grain d'orge, the barley corn guilloche dial. Right, as you can see, they don't they don't spell out the Parmigiani Fleurier, so it doesn't take more real estate from the dial. I think skeletonized hands are entirely justified because why not? You want to see more of this gorgeous dial more frequently, as much of it at all times as possible. And of course, the abbreviated index markers give even more space on the dial, and at 36 millimeter, I think you get a beautiful sight of it, and it's a very unique barleycorn design too, because it's so fine that if it were a little smaller, I think it would even lose the texture. and the market absence of a date indicator, of course, which is also interrupting the dial at the 40 millimeter version, placed as it is right above 6 o'clock here, makes this entire thing a visual delight, if you ask me. I really, really do like the way they work this out. They have it in deep ruby. They have it in what they call warm gray, which is the stainless steel version with a gray dial, and then a silver sand, which is the stainless steel version with abbreviated index markers. If you see it here, this is the warm gray, and this is the silver sand. Perhaps what's more important, though, is how they introduced a new caliber, PF 770, with this watch, which is a significant improvement upon the earlier micro rotor caliber with an extended power reserve. So this one is 60 hours of power reserve compared to the original PF 703, which was 48 hours. And this is, in fact, the automatic one with the full rotor, the 770 that is in this watch, is in fact a higher beating caliber as well. It is a full 4 hertz caliber compared to the older micro rotor. The addition of the full rotor, furthermore, does not burden this piece. The thickness is only slightly increased from the micro rotor, which is 7.8 millimeter, to the 8.6 millimeter of this watch. Even with my profound admiration of Michel Parmigiani and his horological legacy in Fleuriet, as expressed in the micro rotor caliber PF 703 and in Chopard's caliber 196, of course, I can only commend PF's newly energized commitment to providing added value for this watch. I think this was a great introduction this year that they have made in Tonda PF Automatic. And it's not only a reduced sized version of what they already have in the lineup, but also really an added value proposition, especially in the model that they present as silver sand right here, which is a few $1,000 cheaper than the 40 millimeter version with the micro rotor. And in my humble opinion, much more beautiful, because I always prefer watches without a date indicator on them. But that's just my personal opinion. In either case, I think all 3 versions of this new Tonda PF automatic are gorgeous, and the one in pink gold with the deep ruby barleycorn guilloche dial that is set with baguette diamonds for index markers actually won the ladies' watch prize for the GPHG this year in the gala yesterday. So basically, these were the winners for. Oh, we didn't talk about the most important one. Perhaps the chronometry prize went to Grand Seiko. Grand Seiko, as you know, is really Seiko's statement and the statement of Japanese high horology in Swiss lands. And they make sure to submit at least one very strong watch every year. And this Constant Force Tourbillon was their submission, and it won the chronometry prize. And it's quite amazing, of course. We cast Seiko more broadly as the villain in this story of the so-called quartz crisis, but really in many ways the competition that they have always provided and that they have re-energized with the Grand Seiko brand, I think is just as important to the 20th and 21st century of horology as is Swiss watchmaking. So Grand Seiko certainly has its place on the table and provides time and again how they can, in fact, beat the Swiss in their own game, which in this case is a piece that has a constant force mechanism that won the chronometry prize with a tourbillon. The constant force carriage has a ruby on one arm, which acts as a small seconds hand. The watch incorporates hacking function so that the rotating tourbillon carriage can be stopped when the crown is pulled out, allowing time to be adjusted to the precise second. Very cool. So the Grand Seiko Kodo constant force tourbillon, which is made in less than 20 pieces in a limited series and which costs a whopping 382,000 Swiss francs, won the chronometry prize in Grand Prix d'Horlogerie in Geneva yesterday, announced at the gala. So this is what we had in terms of the GPHG prices. I want to take a quick break for rehydration to get a drink of water. And then we'll look quickly at some of the top lots from the rare watches auction at Christie's from last weekend and yesterday's Sotheby's auction, which was the latest in a way concluding the fall season in Geneva for auctions. So let's see. Just want to leave you with something specific. We went through a good chunk of these watches, but we didn't look at what performed the highest, of course. So I will return with that. All right, I'm back. So Christie's, as you know, had two separate auctions last weekend. One was a single owner auction focusing on Jean Todt's watches that realized quite a lot of records as well, especially for François Paul Jean watches. It was a very interesting auction to begin with 7 magnificent pieces that it had, two of which back to back broke the record for most expensive François Paul Jean watch to be sold on a public auction. Here, In the rare watches auction, which came from multiple owners, there was actually, pardon me, a Tiffany dial Patek Philippe Nautilus, which, as you know, was produced in 170 examples to celebrate the working relationship, the collaboration between Tiffany and Company and Patek Philippe that has celebrated its 170th anniversary in 2021. And in this case, it went even higher than the higher end of the estimate, realizing a price of 3,174,000 Swiss francs. This was one of 70, the Patek Philippe Nautilus that brought the 5711 series to the end, along with the new green dial that was introduced. And as you know, now there's a new kit on the block, which is the 5811G. The model has not yet returned in the time and date only steel version. It certainly will sooner than later. But this was lot 34, which sold for more than $3 million. In fact, more like 3.2, without even plugging in the buyer's premium. There were other interesting and significant results, of course. So let me pay a little bit attention to those. There was a 18 karat yellow gold Paul Newman lemon dial, lemon exotic dial, really, mounted, of course, on a matching gold rivet bracelet. You see how crisp that serial number is. The case looks in a very good condition as well, which is always quite desirable, of course, especially when it's a gold watch. Nicely patinated too, with hints of oxidization, which to me at least only adds to the vintage charm of this Rolex Daytona 6263. And that sold for basically $3.5 million, 3,414,000 Swiss francs. That was lot 128. We had a very interesting Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Perpetual Calendar with a distinctive green dial that was diamond set and beautifully guilloche decorated as well. Kind of a rosette pattern that radiates outwards from the center. These very thin and elegant stick hands that usually accompany complicated and gem set executions of the Royal Oak. This was in stainless steel, of course, at 25,654 Royal Oak Perpetual Calendar with guilloche decorated green dial that is diamond set for the indices. Very lovely piece that sold for $500,000, $529,200. Lot 105. We have already mentioned that the very first two-tone Audemars Piguet Royal Oak to be produced, 5402 at lot 109, was actually not sold. We had an A series Royal Oak 5402, one of the first 1,000 to be produced, in fact, that sold for a little more than $100,000. In fact, number 336. So, in fact, exactly in the first 350. Beautifully patinated, everything original, as you can tell from the font of the dates, from the font of the writing on the dial, from the fact that the crown is unsigned, so on and so forth. You know, all these little things you'll learn by actually studying watches for decades. And another interesting result that I wanted to highlight before we move on was this particular Nautilus in platinum with like a charcoal dial that's that has a bezel set with baguette cut rubies, as well as rubies for the indices as well, in platinum with a very distinctive red and kind of a hot red running seconds centrally deployed. Quite a unique watch, but sold for an incredible sum of 693,000 Swiss francs. That was lot 35. Here's a watch that I actually had once the dubious pleasure of holding in my hand at Tiffany & Co. A completely pavé diamond set Patek Philippe Nautilus 5719/1G-001. So in white gold, actually, and that was sold for 327,600 at lot 36. And all in all, much like the single owner auction, Jean Todt's personal collection, this sale realized a total of 23,670,930 Swiss francs, whereas the single owner Jean Todt auction had realized, I want to highlight, since it had such select pieces, even higher than this at 31,877,418 francs. So check that out. I have reviewed it in the past few days. If you want to learn more about the unique watches that were sold in that auction, the Sotheby's that took place on Wednesday, which is to say yesterday, according to my time, but already 2 days ago. Let me see. I have to log in apparently to see the results on this. So just give me 1 second. Okay. Where do we start? We had this trilogy of 5960s, extremely popular model when it was actually in production, especially in steel. And I think rightly so, because 5960 to me, in a way, captures the kind of excitement that I feel the 1518 must have created in its own time. Because after all, 5960, when it first came out, it was the very first reference to combine an annual calendar with a chronograph. And as it happens, this was also their first integrated in-house chronograph caliber that was self-winding. So 5960 was a model, a reference number for Patek that was that represented a number of firsts, and especially in that steel model 5960A with the matching rice grain bracelet. It was very popular here. They had it basically in pink gold for lot number 1, which sold for 52,920 francs. Number 2, the platinum with the blue dial, sold for 47,880 francs. And number 3, the platinum with the gray dial, sold for 44,000 Swiss francs. And in each case, again, you have something that is an annual calendar and a flyback chronograph at one and the same. Wonderful execution that unclutters the dial in a way by encircling all the 3 chronograph registers in one, in a manner of concentric circles. I think it's a very beautiful watch. It's a very practical watch. It's kind of a shame that Patek discontinued it. I hope it comes back in some way, shape, or form. Number 4 was a 5110, a platinum Patek Philippe World Time with the guilloche center dial. That sold for 32,760. A very special multi-scale Patek Philippe chronograph in 5975, which was a limited edition in celebration of their 175th anniversary when it came out. In yellow gold, that sold for $56,700. I think this watch was made in very limited pieces, just a few hundred. Yeah, only 400 pieces in yellow gold. So very, very interesting piece, very intriguing piece that sold there for 56,700 Swiss francs. As you can see, it has the telemeter scale on the outside, pulsometer right inside, and snailed in the center. You have the tachometer as well. A very lovely design of a stepped lug case to a beautiful, beautiful piece at lot 7. Lot 8 was a 5167R that sold for less than 70,000. Again, showing you how the market has gone down, right? Any old Aquanaut was selling for already 6 figures in the most aggressive peak version of the market, and things are slowly but surely coming back to reality, even in these auctions that are very popular and that have a bunch of hype watches combined into one spectacular curation in Philips, in Sotheby's, in Christie's. But as you can see, things are coming back to reality, even in these extremely high pieces. That being said, the 2014, I think it was, when this Aquanaut advanced research piece first came out, that introduced the travel time complication to this case specifically, and had this cutout at the 9 o'clock of the dial to display that particular mechanism. That example sold for more than $500,000, 567,000 at lot 12. It's a white gold, extra jumbo Aquanaut, of course, with a blue dial and a matching blue rubber strap, and of course with the travel time complication, which has proved to be very popular, especially in these sports models, Patek Philippe Aquanaut and the Nautilus. Number 13 was a very rare piece. This was, again, a piece that was made for the 175th anniversary in a way, because Patek Philippe had an exhibition at that famous London art gallery, Saatchi, and they basically made a number of 3940s, right, which is kind of a blast from the past in this case. The 36 millimeter perpetual calendar, beautiful feuille hands, moon phase at 6, and this kind of khaki green dial that I don't think was ever seen in a pink gold case before. The watch, therefore, is of course very rare and looks visually very striking and beautiful in this subtle way as well. I love it. If only it were at a more accessible price point. Lot number 13 sold for 214,200 Swiss francs. A 1340, again, the same reference in white gold, a Patek Philippe perpetual calendar with a 36 millimeter case, that sold for a much humble, much more modest price of 56,700. After all, it's a regular production model. Langevin Centennial Tourbillon at lot 17 sold for 88,200 Swiss francs, which shows the kind of strength that especially more limited Lange pieces have been performing with in the auction circuit more recently. An interesting counterpart to that is lot number 20, which is a relatively rare version of the Lange 1 in platinum that is called Stealth because of its non-loomed and starkly monochromatic appearance. It is really in many ways one of absolute grail Lange und Söhnes, because it's so seemingly noble yet also discreet in white metal, hence the nickname Stealth, and that sold for 25,200 Swiss francs, which of course with the buyer's premium it starts getting there a little bit, but still is roughly around the price point of a Lange 1 on the secondary market, and they are falling. So I think first quarter of 2023 can be a good time to look into Lange 1 and chase a deal. They will be coming closer to 20,000, perhaps not in Stealth or what they call Darth, which is the platinum with black dial and the black background for the date display. That's also desirable. That's also relatively rare. And sells even at a higher premium than the Stealth. But this is the sign of the times that a Stealth at lot number 20 went for 25,200 Swiss francs, not much above the average value of these. Again, first generation platinum on the full platinum rice grain bracelets at lot 2022. Alangonzone Datograph sold for 113,400 Swiss francs, called the GOAT of chronographs, since Michael Jordan wears exactly the same, again on full titanium on the titanium bracelets. The pink gold version of that first generation datograph, the early version of the datograph, that you can almost immediately identify by this triangular expression of the Roman numerals on the indices, as well as the absence of the power reserve. This is a watch, of course, that's famously worn by one of the immortals, Philippe Dufour, the great independent watchmaker, that of the Simplicité fame. And it is therefore called the Dufourograph, and that one sold for 94,500 Swiss francs. A very interesting platinum day date that has this very light, almost powder blue shade of Rolex's quote-unquote ice blue dial, sold for 32,760 Swiss francs at lot 32. At lot 33, platinum Daytona with baguette diamonds for the indices sold for 126,000 Swiss francs. That is a reference 116506 that came out for the 50th anniversary of the model, as you remember, to serial production. A very unique version of a white gold and pink sapphire set, Rolex Platinum Daytona with the grossular dial, so kind of again a monochromatic expression there, in white gold, a 116589 SALV sold for 138,600 Swiss francs. The Daytona Beach at number 34, a 116519 that I like to call Meadow Soprano, since she wore one in the fourth season, sold for 75,600, with a pink mother of pearl diamond set dial with a matching lizard strap. White gold Daytona 116519 LN with the ceramic bezel on the oyster flex, and with a mother of pearl dial, sold for a little more than 40,000. A full pink gold has sold for 50,000 at lot 40, right next to it, right next to lot 40. 42 sold for 50,000 Swiss francs. A number of Nautiluses back to back, a 5711 at lot 50 selling for more than 100,000. 3800 in two-tone selling for 35,000. 3800 with the in steel with a black dial with Roman numerals selling for almost 50,000, and double signature, original reference 3700 Patek Philippe Nautilus, that was retailed by the Zurich-based historic watch dealer and jeweler Bayer, sold for 126,000 Swiss francs, whereas a mid-sized Patek Philippe Nautilus, a 3800, that is co-signed by Tiffany and Co. at lot 56, sold for $88,000. The Nautilus hype is undying, as you can see, since at 5711 /1R-001, the pink gold Nautilus on a full pink gold bracelet with the gradient chocolate brown dial, sold for more than $200,000. Pre-production FP Jaune chronometre resonance with in platinum, with of course the brass movement, since this is a watch that dates to 1999, before they were officially introduced, sold for more than 1 million Swiss francs at lot number 65. I will, in the meantime, send you the link in the chat. So if you want me to pay particular attention to any of the lots, feel free to send a super chat with the number of the lot, and I would be more than happy to take a very close look at it and approach it from both a historical and horological perspective. That is the signature of this channel. After all, a number of FP Jaunes again on the Sotheby's auction as well. A Tourbillon Sovereign Remontoire à Égalité, selling for 478,800 Swiss francs at number 66. An Octa Divine, which is a platinum automatic self-winding FP Jaune with a date indicator at 11.5, running seconds at 4 3/4, and a moon phase at 7. Not to forget the power reserve that sold for 119,700. And Octa Réserve de Marche, again, a self-winding FP Jaune with its singular expression of the dial, more distinctive in a way than the Octa Divine or even Chronomètre Bleu or Chronomètre Sovereign. That one at lot 68 sold for 81,900 Swiss francs. This was kind of surprising to me, but then again, not so much, because it didn't really have any distinctive markers except for the decoration of the rotor and the addition of fondation to the dial. This is a 14990, which really is a special edition of a mid-sized Royal Oak from its time. So it's basically a 14790 that's customized in a certain way. It sold for a little more than $30,000 at lot 74. Beautiful Royal Oak nonetheless. The perpetual calendar at lot 73, reference number 25654 in yellow gold, sold for 75,600. An open worked Royal Oak at lot 76 sold for 151,200. That was a reference number 15305. There is a historical, there is a two-tone royal oak that is historically important, which is the first generation, which is to say 5402 SA, two-tone royal oak that was retailed by Bulgari, and that is evidenced by the inscription of that brand's name at 12 o'clock, in fact, above Audemars Piguet and in a larger font. At that, the dial has a very distinctive but warm patina, not entirely undesirable when you look at a piece like that, especially that has a unique cosine dial, which are much harder to come by, I have to say, when it comes to royal oaks, and especially the 5402s. This one sold for $126,000. A very unique piece to the right collector. I'm sure it meant quite a bit. 222, the original in stainless steel at lot 80, sold for $88,200. An original Speedmaster broad arrow, which is to say reference 2915-1A, sold for almost $120,000. A Comex Submariner at lot 84 sold for 88,200 Swiss francs. That was a reference 16610. One of the highlights of the auction, Chocolatone. This is the possibly unique platinum Toledo by Vacheron Constantin from roughly 1958, certainly late 50s. Very unique curvaceous shape that looks almost like a little square of chocolate broken off from a bar. Reference 4764 with its unique case shape and the triple calendar with moon phase functionality, certainly quite desirable, possibly one of a kind. So lot 95 sold for 604,800 Swiss francs. That was lot 95. A lot of interesting Cartiers back to back. The Grand Tank Cintré, which is one of the sexiest watch shapes to be invented in the way that it wraps around the arm, around the wrist. This is a yellow gold from early 40s. Look at those beautiful miniature Breguet hands and the sapphire cabochon that's set on the crown. That piece sold for more than 100,000 Swiss francs at lot 96. At lot 97, you had the Cartier Crash, one of the biggest hype watches in the vintage market today. Cartier Paris, Cartier Crash, made in Paris 1991, sold for almost $250,000, 214,200. That was lot 97. And at lot 98, you had a Cartier Crash made in London, roughly around the same time, maybe 2 years before. That sold for more than $700,000. A number of beautiful Daytonas, but let's look at some of the most desirable ones and compare it to what is even more likable for me, really, which is the Daytona Big Red. the usual Panda dial configuration with the acrylic tachometer bezel for some contrast, right? Silvered white dial, black sub dials, and the black acrylic bezel. That's 6263, sold for 81,900 at lot 99. Lot 102 was Daytona Paul Newman with the stainless steel bezel and the exotic dial. That's a reference 6239, and that sold for almost $250,000. Another exotic dial, Paul Newman Daytona, this time in the reverse configuration, black dial, white subdials on a leather band. That sold for 189,000. And the two gold ones sold again for very handsome prices. This one with the three-liner Daytona right there under Cosmograph. That's a reference 6241. A full 14 karat gold Daytona with a black dial, champagne chronograph registers, and a black acrylic tachometer bezel. That sold for almost 200 Swiss francs at lot 103. Lot 104 was a gorgeous, another perhaps a little more rare version of gold Daytona at that is not even branded a Daytona in this case. 6263, roughly from year 1970. The dial does not say Daytona, which is perhaps even more rare. Nicely oxidized, warmly patinated, and lot 104 sold for 378,000 Swiss francs. An A series AP Royal Oak Jumbo sold for almost 82,000 at 107. It has certainly seen service, as you can tell from the crown. So not the most desirable A-series Royal Oak Jumbo that you will ever see, but still a pretty nice piece, pretty early piece. That was lot 107. Lot 112 was a Royal Oak Perpetual Calendar, reference 25820 in stainless steel. That sold for 88,200. Another Patek Philippe World Time at lot 117 in platinum with the Guilloche center dial sold for 44,100. A Patek Philippe gold, white gold gondola 5100G limited edition 10-day power reserve that sold for 35,000. Very desirable two split-second chronographs back to back. 5004 is probably one of the most desirable, Pateks of all time. 5004 platinum black diamond set dial. This is a perpetual calendar, split seconds chronograph. Everything but the kitchen sink, basically. Beautiful watch as well. Lot 121 sold for 327,600 Swiss francs. 122 was a split second chronograph in platinum, Very beautiful watch. 5370. With an extra snap-on case back in addition to the exhibition case back right here. That sold for basically $250,000, 226,800. Another Daytona Beach, this time just with the Roman numerals on the pink mother of pearl dial. That sold for 70,000 basically. 116519 at lot 133, a white gold Rolex Daytona with the meteorite dial, sold for 44,000 Swiss francs. A John Mayer at 135, yellow gold Daytona on a matching bracelet and a green dial, sold for 88,000. That was a 116506 and 116528. Sorry, 135, lot 135 was 116508, and lot number 134 is a Daytona reference number 116528, which is again a full yellow gold Daytona on a matching bracelet with a black dial, champagne chronograph registers, and a red centrally deployed chronograph seconds. That sold for 37,800. A so-called Hulk, which is 116610 LV, green dial Submariner with a green ceramic bezel at lot 137, sold for 25,200 Swiss francs. 145, a 50th anniversary Submariner, so-called Kermit, an early example of it at that. 166110 LV, that sold at lot 141 for a little more than 20,000. An OP41 with a Tiffany dial, with a turquoise dial at lot number 142, sold for 31,500 Swiss francs. Absurd. But again, you know, I've seen worse. $5990-1R. This is the travel time chronograph. I have mentioned before that the travel time functionality is very desirable, very popular for Patek sports models. Of course, they have a white gold perpetual calendar version of the Nautilus, but to many, this is really the top of the line. 5990-1R, /1R-001, pink gold on a full pink gold bracelet, all the sporty functions. Lot 149 sold for $250,000 Swiss francs. Right next to it is a watch that's very desirable in its own right. Beautifully hand engraved white gold case, 5160/500G-001. This is a Patek Philippe perpetual calendar, Breguet numerals, engraved case, with a retrograde date function in the middle. Very beautiful. Moon phase at 6 o'clock, sold for a little more than $100,000. Looks like a good deal next to that Nautilus. And next to it is what looks like an even better deal, Same model in relatively more modest pink gold case 5159 R-001, lot number 151, sold for 37,800 Swiss francs. A very unique platinum Grand Complication watch by Patek Philippe. What you have here is a combination of perpetual calendar, a chiming watch, and tourbillon. You remember that khaki dial in combination of with that special 3940R in a pink gold case for the Saatchi edition. Here's a beautiful two-tone khaki green dial, signed tourbillon with the movement number. Here, the tourbillon is visible on the case back. You see the slide for the minute repeater. You see all the openings, all the aperture for the perpetual calendar, the leap year indicator, and the day and night indicator. The moon phase lodged right within the running small seconds there at 6 o'clock. A true Grand Complication with those carved, scalloped, and decorated lugs, and the tourbillon that you can see on the case back. This is, of course, fashioned in platinum, 5207 with a two-tone khaki dial. 756,000 Swiss francs is what lot number 155 realized. A perpetual calendar minute repeater in this beautiful stepped case that has some inkling towards Disco Volante. Lot number 154 is a reference 5074R, a pink gold perpetual calendar minute repeater. Beautiful micro rotor movement that you can glimpse on the back. And that sold for more than 5,541,800 Swiss francs. Specifically, the black dial against pink gold in Patek looks just divine. It's really a great looking watch. Very handsome. 5270G is, of course, again, a very desirable combination for Patek. White metal, salmon dial. In this case, you have those blackened hands and Arabic numerals for the upper half of the dial. Day and night indicator, leap year indicator, moon phase at 6, a perpetual calendar chronograph with those dynamic stepped lugs. The case looks gorgeous. The movement itself is quite nice as well. This is, of course, 2011, already Patek Philippe seal, as you can see. And this is, of course, a piece with the in-house Patek caliber CH29 and 5270G at lot number 153 sold for 163,800 Swiss francs. We're slowly coming to the end. So unless you send some questions or any topics you would like me to discuss, I will close very soon. Feel free to send them with a super chat there are other ways to support the channel and help me produce quality content. Edit the links for you right there. Please hit the like button. That always helps. This is the last watch I will be discussing today, unless something else is forthcoming. Number 152, yellow gold perpetual calendar chronograph by Patek. This is a 5970J. So J for jaune, yellow gold. The last generation of perpetual calendar chronographs to be based on that Nouvelle Lemania caliber. You can see the Geneva seal, the CH27. The architecture is incredibly familiar, of course, if you have the eye for it. The legendary chronograph base of the 20th century, anywhere from the Omega Moonwatch to these perpetual calendar chronographs by Patek, and many others by Breguet, by even Audemars Piguet, certainly by Roger Dupuis, Daniel Roth, and others. They have all used it. They have all dabbled in it. CH27, in a way, was what defined the hand-wound chronograph genre for the 20th century. This is, in a way, a piece of history at 5970. Still Geneva seal from year 2008, a Patek Philippe perpetual calendar chronograph in yellow gold that sold for $138,600. Now, before I close, I want to remind you again, you can always reach me directly at my email address, which is lordhellespont5@gmail.com. That is lordhellespont@gmail.com. You can see the information down there in the crawling ticker and in the video description. That's also your address to make a contribution on PayPal. lordhellespont@gmail.com. My Cash App is LHVVV, $LHVVV. And if you want to make a commitment to increase the quality and quantity of content on this channel, you can always join me on Patreon. And that is a platform where I basically remain in direct communication with the supporters of this channel, and I send them each day, every day, I send 3 links to watch deals online, and I seek also information from those of the patrons who support me on Patreon about watches that they're seeking, about deals that they're pursuing in the horological market, on the secondary market, and I always tailor those deals for them. And that's something that I provide to you at the initiate level, which for now is offered at $10 per month. I think it's a pretty good deal. You get basically 90 plus deals served to you right in your inbox on a monthly basis. It won't stay at that level for too long, so get in while you can. And I will, of course, constantly striving. I'm always constantly striving to provide you with extra content, with added value. So more things to come for those who support me on Patreon. But again, that deal might not last forever. So get in while you can. In the meantime, I'm slowly signing off. So if you have any questions, if you have any interventions, if you have something to say, please feel free to write it in the chat. I appreciate your presence and support, and those of my friends, of course, St. Peter and Aussie Expat, Thank you for joining me on the panel. St. Peter, thank you for sending in your super chat. It's really appreciated. It was a pleasure to discuss the winners of GPHG with you today and finish off our auction reviews with Christie's and Sotheby's. In the coming days, we will also be looking ahead to some upcoming auctions that will be held in New York and in Hong Kong, and also some online-based auctions that are going to be held by in Aachen, Zurich, among others. So keep your eyes peeled, stay tuned. The giveaway is coming up, so I'm looking forward to sending the pumpkin-colored Seiko rowing blazers. Watch out. The guidelines will be posted on Instagram soon, so please do follow me on Instagram. And that is the link I send you now on the chat. And finally, we'll have a very special live stream a week from now on November 18, Friday. I think it will be a very long stream. It will be kind of a marathon where we'll be celebrating the crossing of the 1K follower threshold on Instagram for the brand Watches and Style, crossing the 1,000 subscriber threshold on YouTube, 1250 now, and going up on with the Watches and Style brand, and also my birthday, which is coming up. This is going to be a marathon on the 18th, a week from now, next Friday. I expect to see each and every one of you. I look forward to it. Take care, everyone. Until tomorrow, I'll be with you again. It is going to be great. We'll be looking at some great watches at all different levels. Once again, today I'm wearing one of those Seiko rowing blazers collaborations, my personal blue dial version on the NATO strap, on the Seiko NATO strap that they provided as part of the package. I love it. For me, the enjoyment of the watch really doesn't have with the price. I've always been a huge fan of the Seikos. In addition to my luxury watches, they're almost an entire collection of their own, and I could be just as happy with them, quite honestly. With that being said, I'll be leaving you today. Love you all. Thank you for your presence and support. Please hit the like button on your way out. Subscribe if you haven't. I'm here with Watch Talk and Watch Talk only on a daily basis. There is no other channel that provides that. So stay tuned, subscribe if you haven't. Hit the like button on your way out. Help me generate a little more exposure, a little more energy. Help me expand this community, spread the word, tell all your friends, and I will see you tomorrow with the next one. Ciao, friends.